Chapter 1858. Yi Qianqian and Yi Yuyu both looked over. Shengjilia felt a little creeped out by their stares. "What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that?" Shengjilia felt a little uncomfortable. "It's not just being whipped. You should be cut into pieces and minced into minced meat." Yi Qianqian gritted her teeth. "You mustn't be that kind of man in the future. You won't have a good ending if you abandon someone after you've used them." Shengjilia could even sense Yi Qianqian's murderous aura. He nodded his head repeatedly and said, "Got it, got it." Yi Yuyu laughed and asked, "Why did you suddenly come looking for me today? Isn't it Monday today? Don't you have to work?" Usually, at this time, Yi Qianqian would be busy with work. Where would she find the time to hang out with him? At the mention of that, Yi Qianqian felt even more aggrieved. She looked like she was about to burst into tears as she said, "Why have I been so unlucky lately? Things like this always happen, boo-hoo, let me tell you." He recounted everything that had happened this morning in detail. She said, "That can't be. That's too dangerous. I think it's best that you don't go back for the next few days. Why don't you come stay with me for a few days? We still have a few empty rooms here. Feel free to stay." Yi Yuyu's heart skipped a beat. Yi Qianqian shook her head pitifully and replied, "We're planning to stay in a hotel." "Why are you staying in a hotel? Just stay at my place." "Anan, is that okay?" Yi Yuyu looked at Li Jinnan. Li Jinnan nodded his head. "I'm fine with that. Sister-in-law can accompany my wife at the same time. With two women around, it won't be too boring." Shengjilia didn't think it was appropriate and said, "Forget it. We have to work during the day. It's not good for a pregnant woman to have a good rest. Qianqian, let's just stay in a hotel." "Well, let's stay in the hotel. But Yuyu, brother-in-law, I want to ask, do you have any unused houses in your hands? The kind of second-hand houses that you want to sell to us?" Li Jinnan's house was definitely very safe. Moreover, since it was a second-hand house owned by one of their own, the facilities inside must be trustworthy, saving them trouble. Yi Qianqian looked at him expectantly, her eyes sparkling. Yi Yuyu thought for a moment and looked at Li Jinnan. She asked, "Didn't you mention that your brother's house in Jiangzhou was going to be sold?" Yi Qianqian almost spat out her saliva. Jiangzhou? Jiangzhou was a famous luxury villa district in Kingstown. Yi Qianqian would never be able to afford a house like that. "I say, Yuyu, you think too highly of me. The villas in Jiangzhou are not something that ordinary people like us can afford." When Shengjilia heard that, he looked up and asked, "Is it expensive?" "What do you mean by expensive?" "That was quite expensive. It should be at least in tens of millions, right?" Yi Qianqian drank a glass of fruit juice to calm her nerves. Li Jinnan rubbed his nose and replied, "My brother does want to sell it, but the villa was renovated badly. It's not suitable for you to stay in. I do have a smaller commercial apartment here. It's about 130 square feet. It's in Dragon City." Dragon City, that place was also a high-end residence, but the price should be acceptable. Chapter 1859. Shengjilia didn't answer Yi Qianqian. Instead, he looked at Li Jinnan and asked, "Can you make a move?" Li Jinnan nodded slightly. "Sure. I took it from my second brother. I don't have the title deed with me. If you want it, I'll get it from my brother." "That works?" Yi Qianqian was speechless. "Have you lived there before?" "I lived there for a while, but I moved to the company, so I don't live there anymore." "I see." Yi Qianqian nodded her head and looked at Shengjilia. "Shall we go take a look later?" "Sure." After dinner, Yi Qianqian helped Yi Yuyu clean up and wash the dishes. The two men, Shengjilia and Li Jinnan, sat opposite each other on the sofa and chatted happily. After cleaning up, Yi Qianqian and Yi Yuyu walked in the direction of the sofa in the living room. At a glance, they saw the smiles on the faces of the two men. Are you done? Shengjilia looked at Yi Qianqian, stood up, and said, let's go. Brother-in-law said he'd take us to have a look. So fast? Well, you guys are moving anyway. The apartment hasn't been empty for long, so it should be very clean inside. I don't have anything to do in the afternoon. Let's go together. Li Jinan picked up the car key. Honey, do you want to go together? Since you're all going, I'll go with you. She hadn't gone out in a long time, so she was a little excited. I'm going to change. The corners of Li Jinan's mouth turned up. He turned to look at Yi Qianqian and Shengjilia and said, I'll go help her. You guys take a seat first. All right, go ahead. When Li Jinan's silhouette disappeared down the stairs, Yi Qianqian nudged Shengjilia and asked, what were you talking about just now? No, we were just chatting casually. What did you talk about? I've always felt that my brother-in-law is quite aloof. How can you chat with him so happily? What the hell? Pfft. Shengjilia couldn't help but laugh. Of course you're cold to girls, but we men are different. We have common topics to talk about. What? A car? Beautiful women? Yi Qianqian glanced at him in disdain. That's all men get when they get together. Yeah, beautiful, we're talking about wives. He's talking about his wife, I'm talking about mine. Bah! Who's your wife? Yi Qianqian stood up. We're not married yet. Shengjilia held her in his arms. It's only a matter of time. Yi Qianqian smiled and looked at him. The atmosphere was harmonious and peaceful. Upstairs, Yi Yuyu had found some clothes. When she saw Li Jinan come up, she took one look and asked, Nan, do I look good in this? Nice. You haven't seen it yet. Yi Yuyu pouted. Li Jinan walked up and looked at the dress. He gestured and said, you look good in anything. Since we're going out, let's go to second uncle's house on the way. I really miss those children. Sure, Li Jinan agreed without hesitation. He started to help Yi Yuyu change into her clothes. When they came down, Yi Qianqian and Shengjilia were sitting on the sofa, looking at their phones. When they saw them coming down, they stood up together. Shengjilia replied, I told you not to be so paranoid. Isn't everything fine now? When Yi Yuyu heard that, she asked curiously, what are you doing? Didn't I almost get into an accident this morning? I installed a surveillance camera at home. I just turned it on to take a look. Yi Yuyu felt her hair stand on end. Are you afraid that that person will find his way to your house? It's better to be safe than sorry. Don't scare yourself. He's not that resourceful. Shengjilia had no choice but to tap her forehead. Let's go. Dash. Chapter 1860. Li Jinan drove his own car, so he naturally followed Yi Yuyu. The four of them and the two cars followed Li Jinan around. After a round of discussion, they decided on a destination. Yi Yuyu wanted to go to Li Xiqing's house to see the children, so Yi Qianqian and Shengjilia suggested that they go to the hotel to rest. They parted ways. Yi Yuyu hadn't visited the children in a long time. After buying some toys for them, she went to Wuxia. At that time, the children had returned from school. They sat in the living room chatting and doing their homework. Li Mosen was like a little adult. He watched Li Jianhua do her homework, occasionally giving her pointers and frowning. When Yi Yuyu arrived, Li Jianhua was pleasantly surprised. She put down her pencil and called out, "Auntie." Her small body was obviously much thinner than before. In the past, she had been a chubby little girl. Now, she had less meat on her body, but she had grown taller. Li Jinan felt a sense of danger. He stood in front of his wife and used one hand to block Li Jianyue. He said, "Be careful. Your little cousin is in your auntie's stomach." "Ah, I know." Li Jianyue's face was round, and her skin was pink and tender. Her eyes were like black agate, crystal clear and bright. She looked at Yi Yuyu's belly and said, "There's a little sister in my mother's belly too." Li Jinan raised his eyebrows slightly and chuckled. He picked Li Jianyue up and asked, "How do you know it's a little sister?" "My daddy said it. Daddy said that the thing in mommy's stomach must be a little sister." Li Jianyue tilted her head and kept looking at Yi Yuyu's stomach. "I think auntie is also having a little sister in her stomach." "Why?" Yi Yuyu adored the little girl. She was pretty, lively, and quick-witted. Granny Rong said that a round stomach will give birth to a little sister, and a pointy stomach will give birth to a little brother, but I've never seen a pointy stomach before. So, auntie must be having a little sister in your stomach too. Yi Yuyu couldn't help but laugh. She walked over and touched Li Jianyue's little face. She said, "You're so mischievous. Come down. I bought you a toy." Li Jianyue was a little surprised, but before she could get excited, she turned her head to take a look. She looked left and right. When she realized that no one was coming out, she wiggled her body excitedly and got down from Li Jinan's body. When Li Jinan saw that, he knew what the little guy was up to. He reached out and knocked on her little head. "You haven't finished your homework, have you?" Li Jianyue covered her head and pouted. She looked a little unhappy and said, "Who said that?" "I'm done. It's just that there are a lot of mistakes." Li Mosen walked over with a small notebook and said, "Uncle, take a look at Ursu's homework." Li Jinan rarely had time to visit the little guys, but he knew that Li Mosen had skipped a grade and was in the 3rd grade, and his academic performance was particularly good. As for Li Jianyue, she could only stay in the 1st year. When he took Li Jianyue's notebook, he didn't have much hope in his heart. However, when he opened the first page of the notebook, he was still shocked by Li Jianyue's ugly handwriting. The corner of his mouth twitched as he asked, "What kind of homework is this?" "A dictation." Li Jianyue said loudly. "I feel that my handwriting is all correct. I even looked it up in the dictionary." Chapter 1861. Li Jinan laughed out loud and read it aloud, "Who taught you that?" When Li Jianyue heard that, she was not convinced. She put her hands on her hips and puffed out her chest. "Isn't that so, auntie? I wrote, 'Wolf gets raped.' Is that wrong?" Yi Yuyu was arranging the toys for the little girl. When she heard that, she didn't even look up and replied, "There's nothing wrong with being in cahoots." "Isn't that an idiom?" "That's right." Li Jianyue walked over angrily and said, "Little uncle is a bad guy. Brother Mosen is laughing at me. You're laughing at me too." Li Jinan couldn't help but laugh. He looked over and said, "You're taking your own breasts." Ha ha ha. Li Jinan couldn't hold it in any longer. Taking your own breasts? Isn't that a little too difficult? What? Yi Yuyu looked over. What's wrong with that? You didn't write it wrong. Li Jinan squatted down and took the notebook over to read it with his wife. When Yi Yuyu saw it, she laughed out loud. Li Jianyue's face turned red. She went forward and snatched the notebook from Li Jinan's hand. She turned around and sat down on the sofa angrily. "What's going on?" Su Qianxi's gentle voice was heard. Following that was the sound of slow footsteps. When Li Jianyue saw Su Qianxi, she pouted and shouted, "Mom, they're all laughing at me." Su Qianxi walked down the stairs with a man following behind her. When Li Xicheng saw Li Jinan, he raised his eyebrows slightly and asked, "What's the wind today?" Li Jinan stood up and helped Yi Yuyu up. He said, "I have nothing to do today, so I brought my wife here to play." He looked at Su Qianxi's belly and exclaimed, sister-in-law's belly is growing too big. It's not. Any slower and I'll die. Li Xicheng glanced at Su Qianxi's belly and sighed. Su Qianxi blushed. She elbowed Li Xicheng and said softly, "What are you talking about?" Li Xicheng blocked her hand and said sternly, "What are you thinking?" "I'm saying that taking care of you and the kids will distract me." Su Qianxi blushed even more, gave him a stare, and then went to sit with her daughter on the sofa. Li Jinan was experienced, so he smiled ambiguously and didn't point it out. Yi Yuyu was still playing with Li Jianyue's toys. She said, "Ursu, little aunt bought you a fantasy series of Lego. Do you want to play with me?" She looked at her notebook and said, "I haven't finished my homework yet." With that, she looked at Li Xicheng pitifully and said, "Daddy." With a smile on his lips, Li Xicheng reached out. Li Jianyue subconsciously put the book in his palm, but before she put it down, she immediately retracted her hand. She pouted and warned, "Daddy, don't laugh at me." Li Xicheng didn't agree, but he didn't disagree either. He picked up the booklet and said, "Go ahead and play with Auntie." Li Jianyue jumped excitedly. She turned around and skipped over to Yi Yuyu's side. She shouted, "Little Auntie, I'm here." Seeing his daughter's expression, Li Xicheng smiled slightly and flipped open the exercise book. His smile immediately froze. After a moment of silence, he said, inviting the wolf into the house, "The wolf is besieged and raped. There's no turning back." Li Jinan and Yi Yuyu burst out laughing at the same time. They couldn't help but laugh out loud. Poison is a guest in the village. Every festive season is missed. Chapter 1862. Li Jianyue pouted and shouted, "These are all third-grade questions. I've never learned them before." "She knows all the first-grade questions," Li Mosen said. "Dad, I think Ursu is a fast learner." "That's right. I'm very smart." Li Jianyue didn't know how wrong she was. She echoed, "Although I might have written a few words wrongly, if an old book taught me, I would definitely write them." "Mom, don't you think so?" Li Jianyue was completely unaware of how wrong she was. Su Qianxi laughed until her shoulders trembled. When she heard that, she couldn't help but burst out laughing. Li Jianyue's mouth turned into a hook. Her little face and eyes were red. She said, "Bad guy, you're all laughing at me." Sob sob sob. Su Qianxi quickly stopped smiling and said, "Ursu, these are all third-grade knowledge, right?" "Yeah." Li Jianyue nodded. After sniffing, she swallowed a mouthful of saliva. "Very good. A first-grader can write so much. There are not so many children outside who can write so well." Su Qianxi hugged her daughter and said, "Our little princess is the smartest." Su Qianxi went over and hugged her daughter. Li Jianyue blinked and asked pitifully, "Really?" "Of course. Do you know how to put together the Lego that Auntie gave you?" Su Qianxi hugged Li Jianyue and slowly walked in the direction of Yi Yuyu. Suddenly, her belly was kicked. Su Qianxi was stunned. Her lips curled into a smile as she stroked her belly. Li Xicheng saw it and walked over. He asked softly, "Did this little guy kick you again?" Su Qianxi nodded. "I suddenly kicked her, but she stopped now." She turned her head and looked at Li Xicheng. Then, she pulled him and said, "Accompany your daughter to put together the Lego." Li Xicheng had no choice but to walk over to the pile of Lego. He looked at it and said, "Ursu, come here." Li Ursu walked over and looked at her father obediently. "Do you know how to put it together?" "Yes." "Do you know how to read the blueprints?" "Yes." "Do you want Dad to teach you?" "No need." "Okay, then work hard on your own." Li Xicheng rubbed Li Jianyue's little head. Li Jinan was dumbfounded. Is that even possible? Isn't this a little too convenient? In this way, Li Xicheng could spend more time with his wife and work. No wonder his company was getting better and better recently. No wonder it said that daughters are the closest to their parents. It made him want to have a daughter too. He couldn't help but glance at Yi Yu's tummy and ask, "Are we having a son or a daughter?" Yi Yu looked at him and said heartlessly, "Son." Li Jinan was a little disappointed and replied, "A son is fine too. A daughter would be best." Li Xicheng heard their words and felt even more proud. Looking at his daughter, he said lovingly, "Dad will ask Granny Rong to give you a nutritious meal." Su Qianxi suddenly remembered and said, "I'll call Nanny Rong and tell her to cook more tonight. I want to eat Nanny Rong's sweet and sour fish." Li Jinan didn't stand on ceremony at all. "Add more vinegar. My wife loves it." Su Qianxi laughed and said, "All right, all right, all right." Li Jinan sat on the sofa, glanced at the family portrait hanging in the living room, and asked, "Desu, are you used to living in the capital?" Chapter 1863. Come on, you're actually very proud of yourself. Do you think I don't know? Li Jinan poured himself a glass of water and took a sip. Li Xicheng kept a faint smile on his lips and slowly shook his head. "I'm very happy that Desu is smart, but it's not a good thing for a 6-year-old child to jump too far in his studies. His friend is still 2 years older than him. I don't have a problem with Chu skipping a grade, but I won't allow it for my child." "Are you really not allowed?" "Yeah." Li Xicheng leaned back on the sofa and slowly said, "First of all, his height is already very different from his classmates. Now that he's in the 4th grade, I've already given him a big jump." Pfft! Li Jinan almost spat out. "You're too indulgent of him. Can he learn?" "He can." Li Xicheng was telling the truth and said, "I looked at his results. He's at the top of the list." Li Jinan's lips twitched. "Your children are really freakish." "Oh, I forgot, there's also a little girl. Yeah, this is what they mean by, there's always a shortcoming." Li Jinan looked at Li Jianhua meaningfully. "This little girl is like a normal child in your family. She's also very smart, but she likes to play and can't settle down to study. If she settles down to study, she'll definitely be much better than other children of her age." Li Jinan took it as him showing off. As he drank the water, he couldn't help but wonder if his future children would also be so freakish. If it's a boy, it's not bad to throw him into the army. If it's a girl, he'll raise her at home and feed her until she's fair and plump and dressed up beautifully. As he thought about it, he couldn't help but smile. He looked at Li Jianhua and asked Li Xicheng, "Your 2 boys are so outstanding. What kind of partner should our little girl find in the future? Not to say how much better he is than Desu or Mosen, but he can't be too far off, right?" The 2 children, Li Jianxian and Li Mosen, were too outstanding compared to their peers. In comparison, it was difficult for children of the same age to surpass them. Li Xicheng had obviously thought about this problem as well. Feeling a slight headache, he said, "This problem is not something we parents should consider. Let her choose for herself when she grows up." Li Jianhua seemed to feel that they were talking about her. She turned around and said, "Daddy, I forgot to tell you. Last night, I called my brother, and he said that they are more relaxed with their studies, so he wants Grandpa and Grandma to bring him home to play for a few days before going back to school." Li Xicheng was pleasantly surprised, but it was gone in a flash. He nodded and said, "Why didn't you tell me yesterday?" Li Jianhua stuck out her tongue and said, "I forgot. I only remembered it now." "Okay," Li Xicheng responded quietly, picked up the phone, and dialed the number he had given his son. Li Jianxian was playing soccer. The indoor soccer field was very spacious. There were only him and Yu Chulin. When he heard his phone ring, his eyes lit up. He turned to look at his phone and shouted, "Chu, I'm going to take a call." Yu Chulin was panting from the kick. When he saw Li Jianxian running away, he immediately chased after him and shouted, "Jianxian, you can do that too." Chapter 1864. When Yu Chulin heard this, he panted and ran to where they were resting. He grabbed a bottle of water and started gulping it down. Li Jianxian was obviously looking forward to his father's call. When he saw the word "Dad" on the caller ID, he immediately picked it up and shouted, "Dad." Li Xicheng, who was far away in Kingstown, felt his heart soften when he heard his son's voice. "Yeah. What are you doing?" he asked. "I'm playing basketball with Chu. We're not done yet." "Are you busy?" "No." Li Jianxian replied immediately. The smile on Li Xicheng's face widened. He didn't care about the look in his brother's eyes and asked, "I heard that you want to go back to Kingstown?" "Yes, I've discussed it with my teacher. I can take a week off." "Dad, can I go back?" "Sure." Li Xicheng's voice was light, and he agreed very quickly. Li Jianxian was overjoyed. He hadn't expected Li Xicheng to agree so readily. He exclaimed in surprise, "Dad, really? That's great." "Really? Do you want Dad to pick you up?" "No need." Li Jianxian looked very happy. He sat down and said, "Dad will stay at home with Mom. Grandma and Grandpa will take me back. Then, if I go back, can I bring my friend to Kingstown for a few days?" Li Xicheng was a little surprised and asked, "Is that the guy called Chu that you told me about?" "Yeah." Li Jianxian subconsciously glanced at Yu Chulin beside him and said, "Chu is a good friend of mine. He grew up in the capital and has never been anywhere else. Therefore, I want to bring him to Kingstown to take a look. I'm fine with it, but will his family agree?" "Yeah." "Dad, his parents aren't at home. He's staying at Grandma's. As long as Grandma and Grandpa bring him along, his grandma will agree." When Li Xicheng heard that, he thought for a moment and said, "Sure. Bring them along." "Thank you, Dad." Li Jianxian was very excited and said, "I'll talk to our class teacher tomorrow. I'll go and tell Chu now." "Bye, Dad." "Bye." Li Xicheng's lips curled up slightly as he nodded. After a while, Li Jianxian hung up the phone. Looking at the phone in front of him, Li Jianxian stood up and said to Yu Chulin excitedly, "Chu, my father has agreed. Let's apply for leave from our homeroom teacher tomorrow. After that, we can go to Kingstown together." Yu Chulin was also pleasantly surprised. "That's great. I want to meet your brother and sister. Mosen is very smart. I'm sure you'll get along well with him." Li Jianxian rubbed his palms together eagerly. "What about your sister?" Yu Chulin asked. Li Jianxian was silent for a moment before replying, "My sister is very cute. She's good-looking, and she can be a little muddle-headed at times. She loves to eat, but compared to other girls of her age, my sister is more sensible." Yu Chulin understood. He smiled and nodded. He picked up the ball and said, "I'm not playing anymore. Let's go home." "All right." Li Xicheng hung up the phone and turned to look at his wife, who was playing with Legos with their daughter. "Your son wants to bring a friend home." Su Qianxi was a bit surprised and asked, "The Chu that our son always talks about?" Chapter 1865. The reason why he left his son in the capital was that he wanted Li Jianxian to warm up the lives of the two elderly people. Secondly, he wanted his son to be independent as soon as possible. Obviously, this method was very effective. Su Qianxi didn't think so. She felt a little uncomfortable and said, "How is that smart? Without parents by his side, what's the use of having a well-developed brain? His feelings for the child have faded." "Faded?" Li Xicheng put down his phone and raised his eyebrows with a proud expression. "Why do I feel that our feelings for each other have deepened?" When Su Qianxi heard that, she looked at Li Xicheng with envy and said unhappily, the relationship between you and your son has deepened, but it has distanced us. Li Xicheng laughed. Our son will be back in a few days. When that time comes, there will be plenty of time for you to nurture your feelings. Su Qianxi was still unhappy. She pouted and lowered her head to continue setting up the fairy tale-themed Lego that Yi Yuyu had just brought with her. Li Mosen, on the other hand, lowered his head to do his homework seriously. He didn't seem to be distracted by the voices of the adults at all. Yi Yuyu glanced at Li Mosen and called out, "Mosen, have you finished your homework?" Li Mosen looked up and shook his head gently. "Not yet. Just a little bit more. Have you seen the toys that little auntie brought for you? Do you like them?" Li Mosen hadn't actually looked at them yet. When he heard that, he looked up and smiled. "I like them all." Yi Yuyu heard that and looked up at him. Her lips curled up slightly, but it didn't reach her eyes. She felt a little sad in her heart. This child seemed to be somewhat similar to her when she was young. He clearly called Li Xicheng Daddy and Su Qianxi Mommy, but from the moment they entered the door until now, Yi Yuyu saw that the child was reserved. He accompanied Li Jianyue to do her homework and didn't hesitate to put down his own homework. It wasn't until Li Jianyue was with the adults that Li Mosen went to do his own homework. Although Yi Yuyu didn't want to think too much about it, the child's words and actions, as well as the words that he had just said to her, gave Yi Yuyu a familiar feeling. The helplessness of living under someone else's roof and having no choice but to obey and please others. Yi Yuyu didn't say a word. She looked down at the young girl in front of her. Li Jianyue's face was pink and tender. Her big eyes were dark and innocent as she stared at the toy in front of her. She was very focused. One look and anyone could tell that she was a girl from a rich family. He had no scruples in his actions. He said whatever he thought and did whatever he thought. He was free and unrestrained. In contrast, Mosen seemed to have placed his position a little too neatly. After more than 10 minutes, Li Mosen finally finished his homework. After handing it to Li Xicheng for inspection, he saw Li Xicheng nodding approvingly, and a happy smile finally appeared on his mixed-race face. After he was done packing his things, he went to open the packaging of the toys that Yi Yuyu had brought. Boys of this age, in addition to the various figurines of popular anime characters, liked some car models, or some heavy figures. For example, Transformers or Superman. Therefore, Yi Yuyu had bought him a recently trendy hand model. Chapter 1866. Hearing that, Su Qianxi suddenly felt a little uncomfortable when she saw Li Mosen holding the model box with a look of surprise on his face. Looking at Mosen, Su Qianxi walked over and asked, "Which TV show is this person from?" "It's not a TV show. It's a character from a comic book. I love it," Li Mosen said as he sat on the sofa and opened the package. "You still read comics?" "Yes, my classmates have a lot of comics. We often read them together." "Does your school give you comics?" Su Qianxi asked casually. Li Mosen paused in the middle of opening the package. He lowered his head guiltily and said, "The school doesn't give them to me." "You secretly took it?" Su Qianxi pinched his little face, feeling a bit annoyed. Li Mosen shrunk his neck and said, "Well, we read them after class. We don't read them during class." Su Qianxi saw him like this and felt helpless. She chuckled and said, "I'm not scolding you. I used to do this when I was in school." Li Mosen didn't expect this. He looked up and blinked. "Mom, were you like this before?" "Everyone is like this. Everyone has their own ideas. It's impossible to be completely obedient. As long as it doesn't affect your studies, it's okay to have fun and relax." Su Qianxi's voice was soft. She tapped the tip of Li Mosen's nose. "But don't let the teacher find out." Li Mosen was completely relaxed when he heard this. He said, "The teacher knows." She said the same thing. But she asked us to read them secretly and not affect other students. Anything is fine. Your teacher is so open-minded. Yes, my teacher likes me very much. She often gives me difficult questions to solve. My deskmate often goes to the teacher after class. Su Qianxi smiled and touched his little head. But it's not good for you to always read your deskmate's comic books. If you want any comic books in the future, tell mom and dad, and mom and dad will buy them for you. Also, if you want any model, just tell mom and dad will try their best to satisfy you. Li Mosen's eyes lit up. His fair face was full of a bright smile. His blue eyes were like two beautiful tanzanite. He looked at Su Qianxi and nodded. Yes. Thank you, Mom. As he spoke, he happily hugged Su Qianxi's neck and gave her a kiss. Mommy, Mosen loves you. Su Qianxi finally smiled sincerely and kissed him on the cheek. She whispered, Mom loves you too. You will always be Mom's little baby. Li Jianyue was only halfway through installing the Lego. When she saw them like this, she also stood up and ran over. She shouted, Mom, Ursu loves you too. I want to smell good too. The little guy ran up to Su Qianxi and kissed her on the cheek. Mommy, it's your turn to kiss me. Su Qianxi smiled and kissed Li Jianyue's face several times. Li Jianyue smiled happily and sat beside Li Mosen. Brother Mosen, what is a cat warrior? She asked. Li Mosen's smile faded a little. When he heard Li Jianyue's words, he corrected her, it's not cat hero. It's magic hero. What is magic man? A great hero, a great, great hero. Let me tell you their story. Chapter 1867. After dinner, Yi Yuyu played with Li Jianyue for a while before heading home with Li Jinnan. When she got home, Yi Yuyu realized how monotonous her house was. She let out a long sigh, rubbed her belly, and said, there are still a few months left. Baby, Mommy is so bored. Li Jinnan stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her waist. Why would I? I'll accompany you. Humph, you're busy all day. Oh right, I'm going for a prenatal checkup tomorrow. Well, I'll tell my assistant that I won't be going to the office tomorrow. Let's accompany the baby for the checkup. Li Jinnan's voice was low and sexy. She smiled and tugged at his sleeve. I'm going to take a shower. Want to join me? Li Jinnan was speechless. Yi Qianqian had hot pot with Shenjilia and then went to an arcade to relax for a while before heading to the hotel near the office to check in. After taking a shower and changing into a fresh set of clothes, Yi Qianqian lay in bed and waited for Shenjilia to return from his shower. She couldn't help but take out her phone and open the remote surveillance video. Yi Qianqian rewound the video and watched it from the moment they left the house. She fast-forwarded all the way, but there was no sign of anyone. Yi Qianqian was merely watching out of boredom. It was one thing to be worried, but on second thought, she didn't seem to be a threat. Apart from a ridiculously tall nose and a face full of acne, there seemed to be nothing noteworthy about that person's face. However, just these two characteristics were already extremely rare. Yi Qianqian flipped through the pages and yawned in boredom. He was sleepy. Yi Qianqian had slept too late the night before and had woken up too early that morning. She had also suffered a shock. Her energy seemed to have been depleted. The image on the phone dimmed bit by bit. The fast-forward was not particularly exaggerated, and it was enough to clearly see every scene and every moment. The powerful night vision function displayed the entire pitch-black house on the screen. Even though there was no light in the house, he could still see everything inside clearly. However, all of a sudden, a shadow appeared in the dark room. Yi Qianqian's drowsiness was immediately chased away, and she stood up straight. His heartbeat suddenly seemed to jump up to his throat, terrifying and turbulent. Yi Qianqian paused the video and saw a shadow in the distance. It was a person. He looked a little tall and strong, wearing a cap and a black t-shirt. He was sneakily walking inside. Yi Qianqian's hand trembled, and she dropped her phone. She shouted, "Old Shen." Shenjilia had just finished showering and was drying his hair as he walked out. When he heard Yi Qianqian's voice, he was startled. He looked over and asked, "What's wrong?" Yi Qianqian's body was visibly stiff. She turned her head to look at him with obvious fear on her face. "There's someone at home." Shenjilia's heart skipped a beat. He strode forward and looked at the screen on the phone. On the screen, a tall man was standing impressively. The video was paused, and it made people's hair stand on end. Shenjilia looked at the time. It was almost midnight. At this time, for normal office workers, most of them were already asleep. To sneak up at this time, he must be hiding something. Chapter 1868. In the dim image, the stranger looked around, opened the fridge, and took out a drink for himself. It was as if he had entered his own home. His demeanor showed no signs of fear or nervousness. Such a person was either used to such behavior, or he had no fear of the family. Or perhaps, he had come prepared and had no need to worry that Yi Qianqian and I would pose any threat to him. Shenjilia squinted his eyes warily and stared at him with his amber eyes. He watched as the man looked around the living room. After making a full circle, he opened the door to the room and entered it. "Is there a surveillance camera in the room?" Shenjilia asked. When Yi Qianqian heard that, she immediately stood up and replied, "Yes." "Did he enter the room?" She stood up and went over to help adjust the image of the surveillance camera into the room. The moment she did so, she suddenly saw an enlarged face. In the darkness, Yi Qianqian was caught off guard. Her whole body bounced off the wall and she fell backward. Shenjilia was also startled, but he reacted quickly. He held Yi Qianqian up and stared at the cell phone in his hand. On the screen, the face laughed exaggeratedly. Yi Qianqian exclaimed, "Screenshot! Screenshot!" Shenjilia finally reacted and took a few screenshots of the image. However, the man seemed to be fearless. He grinned and gave the camera the middle finger. Then, he opened his mouth and took out a white object to block the camera. When Yi Qianqian saw the scene, the fear in her heart washed over her. She had been relaxed for the whole day, but at that moment, she was extremely tense. "Old Shen," Yi Qianqian opened her mouth, but the trembling and fear in her voice could be clearly heard. She sounded like she was about to cry, and it made his heart tighten. Shenjilia pursed his lips and pressed her into his arms. He said, "Don't be afraid. I think it's best to get your brother-in-law's help on this matter." Li Jinan was quite famous, and his words carried a lot of weight in the local police station. At this time, if they wanted the police to dispatch the officers as soon as possible, Li Jinan would be the most suitable person to do so. However, it was already very late. It was hard to say whether he was asleep or not. "Don't be afraid. I'll make the call." Shenjilia took out his phone and dialed 110 for the police before dialing Li Jinan's number. "Thank God." From the sound of his voice, Li Jinan was still very energetic. As Shenjilia summarized the incident, Li Jinan's frown deepened. Yi Qianqian couldn't help but sob softly. She asked, "Will we die? What if that person is a lunatic and wants to kill us?" Shenjilia was on the phone when he heard Yi Qianqian's fearful words. He frowned and said, "Don't let your imagination run wild. Li San, I'm counting on you. You have a map?" "Yes." "Send it. I'll get someone to issue a wanted order." "All right, right away." After Shenjilia hung up the phone, he sent the screenshot to Li Jinan on WeChat. Third elderly did not reply. After about 20 minutes, Li Jinan replied, waiting for news. How efficient. He realized that the woman in his arms was still trembling. He hugged her tightly and whispered, "Don't think about it. Go to sleep." Chapter 1869. Yi Qianqian was really frightened. She had never experienced such a shock since she was young. She had thought that such things could only be seen in novels and comics. She had never imagined that she would actually experience such a thing. When the Arabian Nights that she had once thought was really happening to her, other than fear, Yi Qianqian didn't feel anything else. Holding Shangjilia in her arms, Yi Qianqian looked up and asked with trembling eyes, "Aren't you afraid at all?" Of course, Shangjilia wasn't afraid at all. It was the first time he had encountered such a situation. But at a time like this, no matter how worried or afraid they were, it was useless. "You should be thankful." Shangjilia sat down and gently stroked her hair. "You should be thankful that we made the prompt decision to move away. If we had stayed there tonight, we might have gotten into trouble." Yi Qianqian looked at Shangjilia. Yi Qianqian was already scared, and when she heard that, she almost burst into tears. Shangjilia quickly comforted her and said, "It's a good thing you're not here. Don't go to work tomorrow. It's hard to guarantee that your company's things are still at home. If the criminal sees your business card and goes to your company's address, it'll be no laughing matter." Yi Qianqian suddenly remembered and said, "That's right. Why didn't I think of that? If he goes to my company, what will happen to my colleagues? Don't be afraid. Your company has security guards, and they do a good job of security. They probably won't let strangers in." As he said that, he sighed with a hint of bitterness. "I've been stopped several times. Why is your company's security guards always changing?" Yi Qianqian relaxed a little and snorted. "Who asked you to look shifty-eyed?" "Shifty-eyed? Have you ever seen a thief or a rat as handsome as me?" Yi Qianqian's lips curled up. She turned her head and pushed him away. "Go away. You're shameless." "How am I shameless? Tell me clearly. Am I not handsome?" "You're not." Yi Qianqian turned her head away with a look of disgust. Her expression was clearly much better than before. When Shangjilia saw that, he heaved a sigh of relief and said, "How could that be? Didn't I use my beauty to attract you here? Bah, you're the one who's shameless, okay? No matter what, at least I managed to attract your attention." Shangjilia pounced on her. "Open your eyes wide and look again. Am I handsome? Not handsome. Not handsome. Not handsome." Yi Qianqian was stubborn. She turned her head away in disgust and struggled with her hands. "You're not being honest. You deserve a spanking." Shangjilia smacked her butt. Yi Qianqian snorted and took his hand away. "You hit me. Even my father has never hit me before. You've grown up. Your father can't hit you anymore. Your man can." Shangjilia pulled her up and straightened her body. With a mischievous look in his eyes, he said, "If you continue to be stubborn, I'll hit you hard." Yi Qianqian twisted her body, but her brows were still tightly knitted together. She said, "Hey, handsome. I'll let you be handsome for a while." "So reluctant?" Old Shen, do you think this is the great tribulation that Grandma talked about?" When Shangjilia heard Yi Qianqian's words, he felt a little defeated. This guy. He had spent so much effort just to divert her attention. He didn't expect that after going around in a big circle, he would still end up back at the same place. Yi Qianqian didn't seem to notice and asked, "But didn't you say you were 28 years old, getting married at 28 years old? Getting killed at 28 years old? Everything happened at 28 years old." Yi Qianqian wrapped her arms around Shangilia's neck and said in a small voice, "Old Shen, I'm afraid of death." Chapter 1870. Married at the age of 28. Killed at the age of 28. Killed at the age of 28, everything happened at the age of 28. Yi Qianqian wrapped her arms around Shenjilia's neck and whispered in fear, "Old Shen, I'm afraid of death." Unexpectedly, Shenjilia stared at Yi Qianqian and said in a serious tone, "Don't worry. Beauties are the ones with short lives. People like you can live for a long time." Yi Qianqian's eyes widened when she heard that. She gritted her teeth and reached out to pinch his waist. "Ah!" Shenjilia let out a half-hearted scream. He pinched her little hand and pushed her inside. Then, he pinned her down with his foot and said, "Do you still want to sleep? It hurts." Yi Qianqian let go of his hand, but her heart didn't completely relax. She had been extremely sleepy, but now, her eyes were wide open, as if she had been injected with steroids. The two of them chatted for a while. It was about 2:00 in the morning when Yi Qianqian couldn't stand the sleepiness anymore and fell asleep. Shenjilia's mood was very heavy, and he didn't feel sleepy at all. Suddenly, Shenjilia's phone vibrated. It was an unknown number calling from Kingstown. He had a bad feeling about this. He glanced at Yi Qianqian, who had finally fallen asleep. He tried to be as gentle as possible and released her before quietly answering the call. "Is this Mr. Shen?" There was a hubbub of voices on the other end. It sounded a little noisy. The sound of police sirens and walkie-talkies were very clear. Shenjilia breathed a sigh of relief and replied, "Yes. May I know who this is?" "You're from the capital?" the person on the other end said casually. He then returned to the topic at hand and said, "I'm a police officer. My surname is Lin. We are now downstairs from your house. Is it convenient for you to come back now? At this time?" Shenjilia's voice was very low. When he heard that, he subconsciously looked at Yi Qianqian, who had just fallen asleep, and said softly, "Can you briefly describe the situation? My girlfriend just fell asleep. She was scared out of her wits today." On the other end, Officer Lin expressed his understanding. He thought for a moment and said, "We didn't catch them, but the scene was severely damaged. We suspect that they will come back. Now, we need you to confirm the extent of the damage." Shenjilia had expected this, but when he heard this, he couldn't help but feel his heart sink. Yi Qianqian was a simple-minded person. She couldn't help but associate it with the various fortune-telling sessions that had taken place a few days ago. She panicked, and she couldn't help but link it to everything. "I don't think this matter is urgent. Let's go tomorrow," Shenjilia said in a low voice. "That's the only way. It's a bit late now." Officer Lin looked at the time and said, "Then you guys should rest first. Comfort your girlfriend and try not to let her be alone." "Got it, thank you, Officer Lin." "You're welcome." Shenjilia hung up the phone and quietly walked back. As soon as he lay down, Yi Qianqian reached out and hugged him. Shenjilia's body stiffened, and he turned his head to look. He realized that Yi Qianqian was looking at him with her bright and round eyes. She asked, "Old Shen, did the other side inform you just now?" "Yes, they told us to go there for a while. We'll go there tomorrow." "Has the person been caught?" Yi Qianqian asked. Shenjilia's lips tightened, and he gently shook his head. "No, but we'll be fine here." Chapter 1871. When Yi Qianqian saw Shenjilia's expression, she knew that things weren't as simple as they seemed. However, Yi Qianqian didn't dare to ask again. When she heard that, she hugged Shenjilia tighter. "Sleep." Yi Qianqian closed her eyes, but she couldn't fall asleep. After lying in bed for a long time, Shenjilia suddenly said, "Can't sleep?" Yi Qianqian opened her eyes. Her surroundings were dark, but Shenjilia's face was clearly in front of her. "I can't sleep." Yi Qianqian changed her position and stretched. "I'm thinking, am I going to hide like this? If the police can't catch the criminal, won't we have to hide forever and avoid him? How can that be? It's only a matter of time before he gets caught. What if? There are so many drug addicts, robbers, and murderers these days, but they haven't been caught, have they? The more Yi Qianqian spoke, the more scared she became. Don't be fooled by the serial murderers on TV. There are so many drug dealers and drug lords who have been arrested. In reality, if they weren't caught, would they be broadcasted? Shengjilia was at a loss for words. He reached out and tapped Yi Qianqian on the head with his finger. What's in your head? Heaven's justice has a long way to go. One day, that person will be brought to justice. But what if? I have to prepare for the worst. That way, when the worst happens, I won't be caught off guard. If I'm prepared, I won't be so afraid, right? Shengjilia was silent again. After a moment, he said, why didn't I realize that you were a pessimist? This is called nipping the problem in the bud. You're worrying for nothing, worrying about nothing. Yi Qianqian wanted to say something else, but Shengjilia quickly covered her mouth and said, all right, that's enough. Let's go to sleep, shall we? We'll go make preparations early tomorrow and go back to record our statements. Why do we have to record a statement? We're not the ones who did the bad things. This is a necessary procedure. We still have to find out what exactly our family has lost. Ah. Yi Qianqian was already sleepy. When she heard that, she felt even more exhausted. She closed her eyes. I'll go to sleep then. He had thought that he would be unable to fall asleep for a long time like just now. She didn't know if Shengjilia's words had any effect on her, but the moment she closed her eyes, her mind went blank. Shengjilia breathed a sigh of relief when he heard the sound of even breathing. It was a good thing that she fell asleep, no matter when she fell asleep. Shengjilia closed his eyes and fell asleep with Yi Qianqian in his arms. Shengjilia rarely had dreams, especially nightmares. However, he dreamt of an extremely strange scene. They were on a cliff, and in front of them was a mass of fog. Birds and eagles were chirping around them, and they could vaguely hear the flapping of birds' wings. Shengjilia stood on a high vantage point and looked around, but he was isolated and helpless. Wasn't he sleeping with Yi Qianqian in the hotel? How could he be here? Shengjilia panicked. Where are you, Yi Qianqian? However, after the echo reverberated in the surroundings, it disappeared. The eagle's cry grew louder and louder, and Shengjilia's sense of danger multiplied. Suddenly, an angry roar came from behind him. Jilia, get your ass back here. Chapter 1872. Shengjilia's heart skipped a beat, and he shouted, Grandma. However, there seemed to be no end to the abyss. Shengjilia didn't even hear the sound of falling. Old Shen. Old Shen. He vaguely heard Yi Qianqian's voice. Shengjilia turned around abruptly and saw Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian was standing at the edge of the cliff with a child in her hand. When Yi Qianqian saw Shengjilia, she smiled at him. Shengjilia lowered his head to look at the child beside him, and he couldn't help but look down as well. However, the child was wearing cute plaid suspenders and a white shirt. His small head was topped with a watermelon too long hair. He was short and cute. However, his face could not be seen clearly. His face seemed to be shrouded in a layer of fog, with a white glow that could easily confuse one's vision. Old Shen, go home and cook. I haven't eaten yet. Yi Qianqian replied. No one knew what Shengjilia was thinking. He looked at Yi Qianqian and said, There's no rice at home. The expression on Yi Qianqian's face changed as she held the child's hand. Suddenly, she turned around in a fit of pique, pulled the child, and pushed him down the cliff. Shengjilia was shocked. He rushed forward and shouted, Yi Qianqian, what are you doing? Yi Qianqian didn't say a word. She turned around and threw a punch at Shenjilia. Shenjilia shrank back. He felt something tighten around his ankle. It was as if someone was dragging him. When he looked down, he saw an old, withered, and pale hand. Shenjilia was caught off guard, and he was dragged to the ground. Shenjilia suddenly staggered and opened his eyes. When he came to his senses, he was covered in sweat. "Did you have a nightmare?" It was Yi Qianqian's voice. Shenjilia didn't come back to his senses. Once again, he was frightened and turned his head around. Yi Qianqian was looking at him. She looked a little frightened. Her eyes were wide open, and she was still in a state of shock. Shenjilia came back to his senses and let out a long sigh. Yi Qianqian reached out and touched his forehead. Her hand was covered in sweat. He flung his hand in disgust and said, "Dirty." Shenjilia looked around. It was dark. The curtains were not drawn, and the sky outside was already turning bright. It was almost dawn. Shenjilia lay on the bed. He turned his head to look at Yi Qianqian and asked, "You said that you had a strange dream last time. You dreamed that I lost the child. What did it look like exactly?" Yi Qianqian blinked her eyes and asked, "Did you dream about it too?" "Yes, it's very strange. I rarely dream, but when I do, it's almost the same as yours." Shenjilia wiped the sweat from his forehead and sat up. He removed his wet pajamas and said, "Tell me, what did you dream about?" Yi Qianqian thought about it and frowned. After a long time, she said, "How would I know? It's been so long. Who would remember it? What did you dream of just now? It's very strange. I feel like I dreamed a lot of things, but I only remember one thing. You lost the child? You're the one who lost the child." Shenjilia tapped her forehead. "Why did you lose the child? When did I? Bah, don't even think about blaming me." Shenjilia laughed out loud. "You finally understand how I felt at that time, don't you? Did you see the child's face?" Yi Qianqian suddenly asked. Shenjilia's smile faded, and he shook his head gently. Chapter 1873. She rubbed the goose bumps on her arms and asked, "Do you think that God is trying to foretell us something?" Yi Qianqian felt her hair stand on end. She rubbed the goose bumps on her arms and asked, "Do you think that God is trying to tell us something?" "Bah." Shenjilia smiled helplessly. "I think it's possible that it's because you told me about it the last time. That's why I dreamed about it. As the saying goes, what you think in the day, you dream at night. If that was the case, there was still a basis for it. Is that so?" Yi Qianqian felt that it made sense. "Sigh, how can you live a good life every day? Go to sleep. It's nothing." Shenjilia held her in his arms and said, "You can only have children when your body is well. Don't stay up late." "I didn't want to either." "Oh, old Shen, you scared me just now." Shenjilia raised his eyebrows and asked, "I was talking in my sleep too." Yi Qianqian curled up in his arms and said, "You keep calling me grandma and Yi Qianqian. I can't shake you awake no matter how hard I try. Is it that exaggerated?" Shenjilia thought it was funny, and he began to think about it. He had always been a light sleeper, and he didn't expect that there would be a time like this. "Yeah." Yi Qianqian nodded her head profusely. "You have no idea how many times I called out to you, but you wouldn't wake up no matter how hard I pinched you." "What did you call me?" "Huh?" Yi Qianqian was a little confused and couldn't react in time. "You said you called me a few times. What did you call me?" "Old Shen," Yi Qianqian said matter-of-factly. "That's what I've always called you." Shenjilia nodded his head and replied, "Yes, I understand." In psychology, these are all explainable. There is a popular saying that it is psychological. Coupled with the influence of the environment, dreaming is very normal. What do you mean? To put it simply, I'm dreaming because I'm infected by you. F*ck, how can this be? Humph, that's how it is. Shenjilia hugged her and pressed her head. Sleep. Oh, all right. Not long after Yi Qianqian closed her eyes, her cell phone, which was charging on the bedside table, suddenly rang. It was Shenjilia's phone. It was an unknown number with a Kingstown landline number. When Yi Qianqian saw it, she asked, "Is it that cop again?" Shenjilia didn't think it was possible. He took a look and said, "It's probably a harassment call." He pressed the silent button on his phone and put it back. But after a while, after the call was automatically hung up, the phone rang again. It was the same phone call. Answer it. What if it's something important? Yi Qianqian asked. Shenjilia looked at the time. It was barely 5 in the morning. Picking up the phone, he could hear the howling of the wind on the other side. Hello. Shenjilia replied. Suddenly, a laugh came from the other side of the phone. It was a strange voice. I'm not very good, Dr. Shen. Since you dare to call the police, I can only give you a big gift. Shenjilia had turned on the loudspeaker, so Yi Qianqian could hear him clearly. Yi Qianqian's heart skipped a beat, and she began to tremble in fear. Just as she was about to speak, Shenjilia covered her mouth. Shenjilia used his eyes to warn her to be quiet and asked in a calm voice, "What do you want?" Chapter 1874. You want money? Shenjilia asked directly. But in his heart, he secretly breathed a sigh of relief. If this person dared to contact him, there was a way to catch him. What he was most afraid of was that if he didn't come, it would cause panic. Ha ha ha, I'm not stupid. If I wanted money, wouldn't you wait for someone to come and catch me? The man laughed. His voice was hoarse and unpleasant, like a stone scraping the sand. Then what do you want? Ha, I want powder. Without a doubt, the powder was referring to drugs. I don't have such things, Shenjilia said righteously. If you want money, I can give it to you, as long as you don't pester us in the future. But if you want powder, you have to get it yourself. I don't have such connections. You don't? The man seemed to sigh. His throat seemed to be broken. Then I'll have to go after your girlfriend, Dr. Shen. Shenjilia's brows were tightly knitted together. When he heard that, he sneered and said, "Do you even have the chance?" The man seemed to be quiet for a moment. I'm with my girlfriend every day. If you want to do anything, you have to go through me. I have police protection around me. Who do you think you are? There was a hint of provocation in his words. Yi Qianqian was frightened when she heard that. She gently tugged at Shenjilia. There was an indescribable nervousness in her eyes. Shenjilia shook his head gently and gestured for her to calm down. The man chuckled, but before he could speak, Shenjilia spoke again, "When the time comes, we'll have to see if you can endure it or if I can. Since you're calling me now, it means that you're at the end of your rope. There are wanted posters everywhere, and your photo has already been published. You're already starting to feel nervous. You can only turn to me for help now if you don't want to suffer so much." An addict was undoubtedly terrifying. But what was even more terrifying was an addict who had no other way out. To catch a snake at its weakest point, Shenjilia's every word hit the nail on the head. No wonder you're a psychiatrist. You're right. But I have to warn you, if I don't want to live anymore, I can easily kill 1 or 2 of you. Bring it on any time. Shenjilia's tone seemed very relaxed, but Yi Qianqian could clearly see his tightly knitted brows. His heartbeat quickened uncontrollably. Yi Qianqian grabbed Shenjilia's hand and didn't dare to make a sound. As long as you can endure it, believe it or not, as soon as you go out, people will recognize you everywhere. At that time, you won't even be able to eat, let alone make the powder. Are you threatening me? We wouldn't dare. Our lives are still in your hands. Hee hee. Zhang Xian chuckled coldly. His laughter was filled with obvious anger. You sure have guts. I'm not as old as you. Do you really think that no one is monitoring our phones and waiting for your call? How dare you? The man's voice was filled with anger and panic. Shunjilia laughed. What's there to be afraid of? It's just a joke. Yi Qianqian was scared out of her wits. Her body was trembling. She almost thought that what he said was true. She hadn't even been able to relax when she heard the bad news. The upheaval in her mood made Yi Qianqian feel terrible. The person on the other side of the phone was also flustered and exasperated. He roared, "Bastard!" Shunjilia didn't respond and waited for him to continue. Chapter 1875. The warning voice, coupled with the whistling sound of the wind coming from the other side of the phone, was indescribably terrifying. Shunjilia wasn't frightened. He teased, "My woman will go?" His voice seemed to be chuckling. The man hadn't expected Shunjilia to have such an attitude. For a moment, he didn't know what he meant. Shunjilia's tone was unhurried as he said, "My woman is timid. If she's not careful, she might call the police or something. Or she might, accidentally, give you up. Do you think you're the one at a disadvantage, or am I?" "Humph, what do you want?" "I'll go." "You said it yourself." "I'm bold." "TSK." The man looked disdainful. "If I find out you're up to no good, I won't let you off." "Huh. All right, I'll wait and see." With that, Shunjilia hung up the phone. Yi Qianqian was right beside him. She knew very well that he wasn't as relaxed as he made it sound. When he put down the phone, Shunjilia's palms were already covered in a layer of sweat. There were also beads of sweat on his forehead. Hot tears welled up in Yi Qianqian's eyes as she asked, "Old Shun, are you really going?" "Yes, I'm going." Shunjilia nodded slightly and kissed Yi Qianqian on the forehead. "Don't be afraid. It'll be fine." "How can I not be afraid?" Yi Qianqian burst into tears and hugged Shunjilia's waist. "You scared me to death. How can you act so well? You're obviously very nervous, but you still speak as if nothing happened. It's like you're suffering from schizophrenia." Shunjilia couldn't help but laugh. He nodded at her head and said, "What kind of description is that? Do you sound like you're praising me?" "Yeah." Yi Qianqian's face was already wet with tears. She wiped her eyes hard and sobbed. "Why don't I go? If a woman goes alone, he might let his guard down, no." Shunjilia's attitude was very firm. "I'll go. You saw it for yourself. I can act." "Can you?" Yi Qianqian was speechless. She couldn't. She couldn't at all. Her mental fortitude was obviously not as good as Shunjilia's. She might be paralyzed when she arrived at the scene. Shunjilia looked at her and suddenly turned to face her. He held her face in his hands and kissed her on the lips. Yi Qianqian felt even more afraid. Her breathing became heavier. She pushed him away and cried out, "No. Don't go." Yi Qianqian was shocked. Shunjilia was caught off guard by her push, and his hands went to the back of his head. "Don't go." She curled into a ball helplessly and said, "I'm so scared. I think we're going to get into trouble." "Old Shun, can you not go?" Shunjilia hugged her and comforted her softly, "It's okay. It's okay. We're just going to buy something. Don't be afraid." "Old Shun." Yi Qianqian suddenly looked up. Her face was wet. "Do you love me?" Shunjilia looked at Yi Qianqian and said with certainty, yes, Yi Qianqian. I love you very, very much, so I can't lose you. Don't be afraid. I'll be fine. Yi Qianqian sniffled and threw herself into his arms. She tried to calm herself down, but it was useless. Her tears flowed uncontrollably. She whimpered, "What should I do, Shunjilia? I love you very, very much too, but don't go. I beg you, don't go." Shunjilia didn't agree, but he didn't disagree either. Chapter 1876. How can I possibly fall asleep now? Yi Qianqian was about to go crazy. She grabbed Shunjilia and said, "Old Shun, don't worry about this. I think he's been bullying us because we give him the impression that we're easy targets. As long as we're not afraid of him, he won't be able to do anything to us." "You, Qianqian," Shunjilia interrupted her. Yi Qianqian's frightened eyes were filled with tears. She looked at Shunjilia with confusion and helplessness. Shunjilia comforted her and said, "It'll be fine." "But, no buts." Shunjilia gently patted her on the back. "My grandmother said that I'll definitely live to be 100 years old. Your grandmother can be very unreliable at times." Yi Qianqian retorted reflexively. Shunjilia sighed heavily. "What do you want me to do with you? You refuse to believe my grandmother's good words. Instead, you believe the bad ones without a doubt." "I didn't, you didn't. Think about it carefully. Did you?" Yi Qianqian was speechless. Shunjilia looked at her and said, "It'll be fine. I'll call the police to inform them." "Call the police?" Yi Qianqian was shocked. "If that person finds out, won't he take revenge on us?" "He'll take revenge on us even if we don't call the police." Shunjilia stared at her. "Don't believe the words of that kind of person. If he dares to do anything to us, it's only a matter of time. We'll call the police to nip it in the bud. However, if we want to arrest him, we'll have to catch him like a turtle in a jar. What are you thinking?" Yi Qianqian felt even more uneasy. Shunjilia glanced at her and didn't answer. After calling Officer Lin, Shunjilia and Yi Qianqian soon met up with them. It was 6:00 in the morning, and Kong Cheng was still asleep. Officer Lin had been busy with work and hadn't slept all night. Shunjilia and Yi Qianqian were the same. After sending someone to buy breakfast, Officer Lin brought them to a secluded room in the station. "Officer Lin, I need your cooperation." Officer Lin glanced at Yi Qianqian, who was obviously frightened, and nodded. "Tell me what happened. I'll make the arrangements later. I don't need it today. Just take care of her for me." Shunjilia glanced at Yi Qianqian. "I'll go there myself. I'm guessing this person wants to meet me twice. We can do this." Yi Qianqian finished her breakfast as if she was chewing wax. Shunjilia coaxed her to sleep on the sofa in the police station. With her head resting on Shunjilia's lap, Yi Qianqian quickly fell asleep. By the time he woke up, it was already noon. Yi Qianqian stood up abruptly and walked out. There were many people in uniform outside. When the police officers saw Yi Qianqian, they were obviously a little surprised. Yi Qianqian shouted, "Shunjilia." Such a voice attracted the attention of many people. A policewoman walked up and said, "He went out to buy lunch for the time being. Don't worry." Yi Qianqian breathed a sigh of relief and asked, "How long has he been gone?" "Just now. Let me tell you when you wake up." "What about Officer Lin?" Yi Qianqian felt that something was amiss. The policewoman was stunned for a moment and quickly replied, "He's off duty." Yi Qianqian's heart sank. She turned around and went back into the room to wait for Shunjilia to return. But the wait went on for an hour. Chapter 1877. Yi Qianqian couldn't help but look at the policewoman. Where did he go? The policewoman couldn't answer. She looked at Yi Qianqian and smiled. Yi Qianqian's heart suddenly sank. Kingstown was an old city. Streets and alleys intersected, and there were all kinds of small roads in the urban villages. There was a small road on one of the old streets called Songyun South Street. Shenjilia followed the GPS and walked over. He searched for a while and saw a chess stall. A few white-haired old men were sitting there with a big parasol on top. Beside them were old people riding bicycles. The 5 old men looked to be in their 50s or 60s. One of them was wearing a sweatshirt and holding a fan. His legs were spread apart, and he was enjoying the cool air. Another was playing chess. "Pa, I'll eat you." The old man's old and energetic voice was filled with excitement and laughter. Shenjilia walked up to take a look. He looked at one of the old men and said softly, "Business." The old man's smile froze. He turned to look at Shenjilia and sized him up. Shenjilia's lips were red and his face was pale. Although there were some dark circles under his eyes, it wasn't to the extent that he was doing business. He didn't think it was a business. The old man pretended not to know and asked, "What's that?" "Business," Shenjilia repeated. Shenjilia repeated himself. He picked up his phone and opened WeChat. He sent a message to a new friend he had just added. Soon, a call came in. Shenjilia picked up the phone and handed it to the old man. The criminal was obviously very familiar with the old man. The old man sized him up and said something over the phone. After a series of and "oh," the old man tapped the phone with his fan and typed a few words on WeChat before returning the phone to Shenjilia. Shenjilia understood. He put the phone in his pocket and walked in step by step. There were many people inside, and there were children running and playing at the entrance. Shenjilia walked in and saw a child. He asked, "Little boy, are there any adults here?" The child wasn't afraid of strangers. He smiled and pointed behind him. Shenjilia walked in and saw an open door. Shenjilia strode in. A middle-aged woman who looked to be in her 30s or 40s had dark skin and her hair was tied up. She looked Shenjilia up and down and asked, "What are you doing here?" "Business," Shenjilia repeated. The woman asked, "Who wants it?" "Him." Shenjilia took out his phone and showed her his WeChat. On WeChat was the page that the old man had just sent. The woman took a look and said, 5,000. Shenjilia had no concept of that, but he did bring a lot of money with him. Hearing this, he took out the money, counted 5,000 yuan, and handed it to her. After the woman verified its authenticity, she took out a small white bag the size of 2 fingers from the interlayer of the table. "That's it?" Shenjilia looked at it and frowned. The woman sneered, "Is this your first time buying? You'll get used to it after a few more times. Get lost, and be careful on your way." Why is his attitude so bad? Shenjilia still didn't say a word. He put the things in his pocket and walked out. Before he left the alley, he received another call from an unknown number. It was another landline. That person was looking for a landline to call him. Shenjilia was already used to it. When he answered the call, he heard the unpleasant voice on the other end. "Come out." "I'm coming out." Chapter 1878. Shenjilia did as he was told. When he walked out, he saw the group of old men. Those people glanced at Shenjilia in unison and then ignored him. Shenjilia walked to the left. After looking around, he quickened his pace. His heart tightened. This person probably wanted to settle things in one go. Shenjilia didn't hang up. He asked, "Are you here to get something?" "Why are you asking that?" "Just keep walking." Shenjilia lowered his head and kept walking. "Turn right." An unpleasant, hoarse voice commanded Shenjilia to go in that direction. Shenjilia had already guessed that the person must be nearby and watching him. But where was he? He looked around but didn't find anything strange. What are you looking at? Turn right. Shenjilia did as he was told. He narrowed his eyes in thought. This guy must be somewhere high up. He raised his head and looked around. Nothing. However, there was a building that used reflective glass. It was a small villa. Don't tell me it's in here. Turn left. The unpleasant voice came again. Shenjilia's heart skipped a beat. Not only did he not turn left, but he dodged to the right. The man was angry and said, I told you to turn left. Where are you going? Shenjilia walked even faster and said, if you want something, come and get it from me. The man was exasperated. In a moment, Shenjilia could clearly hear the sound of something smashing coming from the other side of the phone. Damn it, you're asking for it. Believe it or not, I'll kill your woman. You'll have to have the chance first, Shenjilia snorted. You're the first person I've ever met to be so arrogant when you're asking for help. There was no sound coming from the other side. Shenjilia could clearly hear the wind whistling and the sound of friction. There was no doubt that the man had started to run. Shenjilia's heart sank. After a few turns, he came to a small alley where there was a small grocery store. He asked for a bottle of white wine and a lighter. He left $100 on the counter and quickly moved forward. Shenjilia opened the bottle as he walked. His footsteps were fast. Behind him, he heard the sound of rapid footsteps. Shenjilia heard it clearly. He jumped to the side and whipped his head around. However, it was the girl from the convenience store. The young lady was taken aback by Shenjilia's sudden outburst and replied sheepishly, Give me my change, no need. Shenjilia turned around and looked as if he was about to run. The young lady felt that he was a little strange. It's a few dozen yuan, and he doesn't want it anymore? It was as if he was running for his life. As he muttered to himself, a black shadow dashed out from behind him. His face was ferocious and he looked a little scary. The little girl was startled and ran to the side. The figure didn't pay any attention to her and continued to charge straight at Shenjilia. When Shenjilia heard the voice behind him, his heart sank, and he ran even faster. Stop right there. A hoarse and unpleasant voice rang out. With a bottle of white wine in his arms, Shenjilia gritted his teeth and ran toward the intersection. I told you to stop. When he heard the footsteps behind him, Shenjilia cursed under his breath, idiot. A very low-level person, a cornered drug addict. He had actually been frightened by such a person for an entire night? Shenjilia ran to the intersection in a few steps. He turned around abruptly, opened the lid of the bottle of white wine, and splashed it forward. Chapter 1879. The man hadn't expected such a thing to happen. He took a step back in fright. Then, he was hit by the fire. Ah! The man screamed, but he didn't forget his original intention. He lunged at Shenjilia. Shenjilia dodged and kicked him. Then, he heard the sound of footsteps behind him. The criminal was surrounded. He could clearly hear the sound of guns being loaded. With a horrified expression, the drug addict fell to the ground. He put out the fire on his body, but his head was pressed against the gun. He stared at Shenjilia with hatred and gritted his teeth. King played me. Shenjilia was already covered in sweat. When he heard that, he laughed coldly. But his heart was indescribably relaxed. South Songyun Street was swept. A total of 15 people were arrested. It was already afternoon when he returned to the police station. Before Shenjilia entered, he could already hear Yi Qianqian's footsteps in the distance. When she saw Shenjilia, Yi Qianqian burst into tears. She lunged at him and cried without holding back. Officer Lin saw it and found it funny. His heart ached. He patted Shenjilia on the shoulder and said, "Your girlfriend was scared. Comfort her." Shenjilia's heart softened. He hugged Yi Qianqian tighter and said softly, "It's okay. Don't cry. There are so many people watching." Yi Qianqian felt even more wronged. She bit his shoulder. Shenjilia cried out in pain and said, "It's over. It's over. Are you trying to murder your husband?" Yi Qianqian bit him even harder. After sobbing a few times, she pushed him away and strode out of the police station. Shenjilia saw that something was wrong. He quickly chased after her and comforted her. "I've caught that person. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Are you surprised? Are you touched?" Yi Qianqian's mouth twitched. She cried again. Shenjilia was frightened. He quickly hugged her and comforted her. All right. Don't cry. I was wrong. I was wrong. I was really wrong." Yi Qianqian hugged him and sobbed angrily. "Why didn't you tell me that you were going to die? If I woke up to the news that you were killed by someone on the side of the road, what would I do in the future? I'm fine, aren't I?" Shenjilia said helplessly. "Besides, how can you curse your boyfriend like that?" All right, stop crying." Yi Qianqian didn't want to cry either, but the grievances were overwhelming. Her eyes were swollen like 2 walnuts, and she couldn't stop crying. Shenjilia felt helpless and said softly, "Shall we go home first?" "No, I'm going to a hotel." Shenjilia laughed and pulled her along. "Let's go." Yi Qianqian felt that it was the longest 2 days of her life. After these 2 days, he became especially happy at other times. After staying in the hotel for a few days, they started to move. The small house was listed as a second-hand house. Yi Qianqian and Shenjilia moved all their belongings to their new home. The police officers presented Shenjilia with a silk banner. On it were 2 rows of words, "Courageous Good Samaritan, Outstanding Citizen." The words were pompous and simple. Yi Qianqian threw it under the bed in disgust. When Shenjilia asked about it, Yi Qianqian replied with 2 words, "Throw it away." Shenjilia was helpless. After the matter was settled, the people in the capital started to give him bad news. Chapter 1880. Shenjilia was stunned when he heard the news. He rubbed his nose awkwardly. When he turned to look at Yi Qianqian, he saw the woman laughing heartily. "I see." Shenjilia spoke to his colleague on the phone and sighed. "It's my fault. It's my fault. Tell the director that I'll go back once I'm done here." When his colleague heard that, he flew into a rage and said, "You rascal, do you know how many things have been going on in the hospital recently? You haven't even F*King finished dealing with them. I haven't even F*King waited for you to F*King finish dealing with those trivial matters on your side, and all of us will be done for. Do you know how busy we've been lately?" The speaker was on, and Shenjilia could almost hear the saliva on the other end of the line. After a moment of silence, he said, "You should at least give me some time. The director said that if you don't come back soon, he'll deduct all your bonuses. You'll lose your promotion bonus and your year-end bonus. I don't care if you're a relative of the royal family. It's useless to ask your father for help." What a vicious statement. The total sum of the bonuses was not a small figure. Shenjilia couldn't stand it anymore. Hey. You can't be so unkind. I still have a wife and child to support." Yi Qianqian sat up and threw a pillow at him. Shenjilia caught it firmly. The other end of the line was silent. After a long time, he said, "So what if you're in a relationship? I'll tell the director to deduct all your bonuses." Hey! The call had already been hung up. Shenjilia had no choice but to turn to look at Yi Qianqian, who was sitting on the bed. He threw the phone aside and pounced on her. How dare you laugh at me? Yi Qianqian screamed and shrank back. Then, she let out a peal of laughter that was loud enough to pierce through the ceiling. It tickles. Shenjilia's hands groped her body and pressed down hard. He snorted and said, "You deserve to be punished." Yi Qianqian groaned. She was soon out of breath from the punishment. The swaying of the bed became more and more joyful as time passed. When he returned to the capital, Shenjilia dealt with all the work that had been delayed. Fortunately, the old director was kind enough. Although he had been demoted, there was still a mountain of work to be done. In the words of his colleagues, "You deserve it." Shenjilia had no choice but to bitterly finish his work during the day. When he got home at night, he called his girlfriend to complain. To Shenjilia's surprise, not only was his year-end bonus not deducted, but it was also increased by quite a bit. After receiving the reward, Shenjilia glanced at the old director. "Oh, Amos snorted. If you bring your girlfriend to the imperial capital and run off to Connecticut to work again, I'll fire you." Shenjilia laughed out loud and half-heartedly gave a military salute. "Yes, sir." 4 months was neither a long time nor a short time. The weather turned cold, and the nights in the capital grew longer. The end of the year was approaching. 2 days before the holidays, Shenjilia made a special trip to Kingstown. After that, he went to Yuntown with Yi Qianqian. The weather in Yuntown was quite warm. When they arrived, Yi Zhenhua was wearing a cotton-padded jacket and sitting in the living room, watching TV and drinking tea. "Dad!" Yi Qianqian called out as she dragged her luggage into the room. "Uncle!" Shenjilia exhaled a breath of cold air, but his smile was bright. "Happy New Year!" Chapter 1881. Yi Qianqian took off her scarf and stuck out her tongue when she heard that. "How did you know?" "Humph, I'm your father." Although he said that, he still took the things from her hand and said, "Have a cup of tea. It's freshly brewed." He covered Yi Qianqian's hand and frowned. "Ouch, it's cold. Why didn't you wear more?" "I wore more. Look at how swollen I am." Yi Qianqian raised her hand. Sure enough, it was swollen. Yi Zhenhua frowned and handed her a cup of tea. "Drink it. It'll warm you up." Yi Qianqian took it and drank it in one gulp. "Ah! It's delicious." She turned to look at Shenjilia and picked up another cup. "You drink it too." Shenjilia took it and drank it in one gulp. "Good tea." Yi Qianqian smiled and put the cup down. Yi Zhenhua was unhappy and said with a sour tone, "A grown girl can't be kept at home. She doesn't even treat your father that well." "Hey, Dad, didn't you just drink it?" Yi Qianqian asked Yi Zhenhua to sit down. "Sit down. We're going out to eat today. Don't cook for yourself. It's such a cold day." "Humph." Yi Zhenhua glanced at Yi Qianqian and then looked at Shenjilia. "When do you plan to get married?" Shenjilia touched his nose and said, "It'll probably be a while. We didn't do it before. We'll have to wait until Qianqian is 28. Yi Qianqian rarely communicated with her father, so they didn't tell Yi Zhenhua about her fortune-telling with the blind uncle. Naturally, he didn't know about it. Yi Zhenhua wasn't surprised when he heard that. He nodded and said, "It's good that your relationship is good. Don't be together for so many years. You won't be able to wait until Qianqian is 28. Yi Qianqian was unhappy when she heard that. She rebuked, "Dad, are you cursing me?" Yi Zhenhua stood up and looked at the time. "It's getting late. If we're going out to eat, let's hurry. It'll be even colder when it rains." The weather in Yuntown hadn't been good recently. When they heard that, they didn't waste any more time. They grabbed their bags and headed out. Yi Zhenhua had ordered all of Yi Qianqian's favorites. In the end, she symbolically waved the menu in front of Shenjilia as a sign of asking for his opinion. Yi Qianqian wanted to laugh, but she shrank back when Yi Zhenhua glared at her. Yi Zhenhua had the habit of making tea after a meal. After dinner, he returned home, boiled a pot of water and sat in front of the tea tray. "Shen, come and sit for a while." Shenjilia didn't know what to do at first. When he heard this, he walked over and sat down in front of Yi Zhenhua. Yi Zhenhua skillfully washed and brewed the tea. His movements were smooth and graceful. He glanced at Shenjilia and asked, "Shen, does your family not like our Qianqian very much?" Shenjilia glanced at Yi Qianqian when he heard that. When Yi Qianqian heard that, she moved a stool over and sat down. Yi Zhenhua snorted and looked at his daughter. "What are you doing?" "I wanted to drink some tea." Yi Qianqian found a random excuse and picked up a cup of tea. She almost scalded herself. "Don't be so rash," Yi Zhenhua rebuked her, but he still took the cup from her. "Drink it when it's cold." As he spoke, he looked at Shenjilia and asked, "Does your grandmother not like our Qianqian very much?" Chapter 1882. Yi Zhenhua sipped his tea and said slowly, "I know that Yu suffered at your hands before." As he spoke, he glanced at Shenjilia. "I heard that the old lady in your family treats my Yu very badly. I don't expect her to treat my Qianqian very well. However, you'd better protect my little girl. In the past, I was always worried that she couldn't find a partner. Now, I'm worried that she'll be bullied by your family." He sighed and looked at Yi Qianqian. Exasperated with her failure to live up to his expectations, he said, "Can't you just let me worry a little less?" Yi Qianqian felt a little wronged and replied, "You're the one who's worried. What does that have to do with me?" Yi Zhenhua glared at her, but his face was full of helplessness. Sigh. "Don't worry, uncle." Shenjilia looked at Yi Zhenhua and said seriously, "No matter what, taking good care of Qianqian is my first duty. I'll take care of my grandmother. Even if Qianqian can't marry me now, I can wait. It's only a year or so. After that, we'll spend the rest of our lives together. Between us, it doesn't matter whether we have this certificate or not." Yi Qianqian nodded her head in approval. When Yi Zhenhua heard this, he didn't know what to feel. He snorted and said, "You better be telling the truth. If you dare to bully my daughter, I'll go to the capital with a knife and chop you up." Shenjilia grinned, revealing his rosy lips and pearly white teeth. "Then you won't get the chance. You have a sharp tongue." Although Yi Zhenhua said so, a smile bloomed on his face. He seemed to be in a good mood. After chatting with the elders in the living room, Yi Zhenhua soon felt sleepy. After they left, the weather was a little cold, and Yi Qianqian didn't feel like showering. She took off her coat and lay on the bed, refusing to get up. The two of them had been separated for 4 to 5 months, and Shenjilia had been busy in the capital. The feeling of a long-distance relationship was really not a good one. More importantly, Shenjilia had gone to fetch Yi Qianqian from Kingstown to Yuntown the moment he landed. He hadn't had the time to be affectionate with her. Now that the trip was over, Shenjilia couldn't help but start groping her. Yi Qianqian twisted and whispered, "The soundproofing here is terrible. Don't touch me." "It's okay, I'll be gentle." "Bah, we'll talk about it tomorrow. What's the rush?" Yi Qianqian kicked him away and hugged herself tightly. She refused to let go. Shenjilia was actually a little hesitant, but when he thought about how he had to leave a good impression on his future father-in-law, he gritted his teeth and agreed. But who would have thought that clenching his teeth like that would cause him to be unable to sleep for the entire night? When Shenjilia woke up the next day, he looked dispirited and listless. When Yi Qianqian saw that, she lowered her head and pretended not to know anything. After eating the breakfast prepared by Yi Zhenhua, Yi Qianqian suddenly had the sudden urge to visit Fang Tongtong. Shenjilia knew that Yi Qianqian couldn't let it go, so he didn't stop her. However, when they arrived at Fang Tongtong's shop, they realized that the shopkeeper was Fang Tongtong's mother. When Fang Tongtong's mother saw Yi Qianqian and Shenjilia, she felt a little conflicted. "You're back?" Yi Qianqian nodded her head and looked inside before asking, "Where's Tongtong?" "Tongtong went to Thailand for a vacation." As she spoke, she took out a stool from inside. Sit for a while." Chapter 1883. Oh. Mrs. Fang nodded and looked at Yi Qianqian and Shenjilia. There were a few emotions in her eyes that Yi Qianqian couldn't understand. After staring at them for a while, Mrs. Fang smiled and said, "Thank you, Qianqian." Yi Qianqian was stunned. "Thank you for being willing to come and see our Tongtong." Mrs. Fang looked at Yi Qianqian. Although she was smiling, her eyes were already red. "Some time ago, I was the one who spread those rumors. I know that our Tongtong likes your boyfriend." Mrs. Fang spoke in a dialect, so Shenjilia didn't really understand. But seeing their reactions, he could almost imagine that they were talking about him. Yi Qianqian didn't answer and just looked at her. Mrs. Fang forced a smile and said, "So, I wanted to ruin your relationship and exaggerate the matter a little. Then, everyone in town would know that Tongtong was bullied by you." Yi Qianqian was silent and didn't say anything. "But I didn't expect that my daughter would be defiled by that beast." When the court heard the verdict, they said that the man was mentally ill and couldn't be sentenced. "They just locked him up in a mental hospital, but he drove my daughter crazy." Mrs. Fang cried out and looked at Yi Qianqian. In the first month, Tongtong almost committed suicide. Yi Qianqian was stunned. She didn't know about this at all. "Fortunately, I found out in time. Otherwise, I might have lost my daughter." Mrs. Fang wiped her tears and sobbed as she said, "I know I went overboard in the past, but Tongtong has already been bullied so badly. She didn't have many friends since she was young, and she has always treated you as her best friend. You know how she and I have treated you all these years. During this period of time, Tongtong has always been very regretful. She thinks that you are still her good friend, but she doesn't have the face to look for you. I beg you, Qianqian, forgive our Tongtong, okay?" Yi Qianqian didn't say anything. She took out a tissue from her bag and handed it to her. Mrs. Fang took it and looked at Yi Qianqian, then at Shenjilia. "Your boyfriend is really good. I know that Tongtong was just momentarily possessed. Qianqian, don't be calculative with her, okay?" Yi Qianqian had never been a cold-hearted person. Seeing an elder cry like this in front of her, her heart was like a cup of tea that had been steeped for a long time, and it was suffused with bitterness. "I understand," Yi Qianqian whispered. He stretched out his hand to wipe away her tears, feeling a little sorry for her. Fang Tongtong wasn't a bad person. Yi Qianqian knew better than anyone else. Hearing this, Mrs. Fang raised her head and tears rolled down her cheeks again. She nodded and said, "Qianqian, that's great. Qianqian, it's the new year. Can you give Tongtong a call?" After that, Mrs. Fang seemed to realize that her request might be a little too much, so she awkwardly added, "It's the new year, and she's alone in Thailand. I'm a little worried. If you don't want to call her, that's fine too, alright, don't cry," Yi Qianqian said softly. "It's the new year. Be happy." Mrs. Fang smiled happily and nodded. Yi Qianqian was not in a good mood, but at the same time, she was in a good mood. Chapter 1884. After all, they had been friends for so many years, and Fang Tongtong had encountered such an incident. However, he still felt that something was wrong. Mrs. Fang's words might have given her a legitimate reason. Although Shenjilia didn't understand what they were saying, he could roughly guess what they were talking about. On the way to the airport, he saw Yi Qianqian staring at her cell phone in a daze. He sighed softly and said, "If you want to call, just do it." Yi Qianqian glanced at Shenjilia and suddenly felt a little sad. Shenjilia hated Fang Tongtong so much, yet he allowed her to make a phone call? It would take them more than 10 minutes to reach the airport. Yi Qianqian thought for a moment and dialed Fang Tongtong's number. It rang for a while before the call was picked up. "Hello, Qianqian?" It was Fang Tongtong's voice. However, compared to his previous flamboyant and enthusiastic voice, his voice now seemed a little cautious. It seemed to be a test, as if he didn't dare to believe it. She then said, "Tong Tong, Happy New Year." Fang Tongtong had been in Thailand for a few days. Intermittently, a few people came to wish her, Happy New Year. However, no one could say such a simple blessing to make her feel so moved to tears. Fang Tongtong felt a lump in her throat. For a long time, she was unable to speak. Hearing the silence on the other side, after a long time, he finally said, "You too." Fang Tongtong did not say anything else, but in that instant, a smile spread across her lips. How nice. She hung up the phone and looked out the window. It was drizzling outside. The weather this year was not good, and it was wet everywhere. However, his mood was inexplicably better. Shenjilia glanced at her, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. It was already evening when they arrived at the imperial capital. Mrs. Shen had been waiting outside the departure lounge for a long time. When she saw Shenjilia and Yi Qianqian walking out chatting and laughing, a smile blossomed on her face. She rushed forward to Yi Qianqian's side and said, "Qianqian, you're finally here again. Auntie missed you so much." Yi Qianqian was a little embarrassed and called out, "Auntie, did he tell you that I was coming today?" He was, of course, referring to Shenjilia. Of course, this was a matter of course. Mrs. Shen smiled and said, "Yes, he suddenly applied for leave and went to Kingstown. I guessed that he must be with you. After asking around, I found out that he was indeed coming back. That's why I thought that he must be picking you up. Don't feel pressured. I just miss you and want to talk to you." She looked around and asked, "Are you the only one here?" "That's right." Yi Qianqian was a little flattered. No. Your uncle is here." Mrs. Shen looked around and finally found Shen Longyue in the crowd. "There he is." Shen Longyue was on the phone from behind. He walked over while talking on the phone. He wore a pair of black-rimmed glasses and had a smile on his face. He looked quite kind. Yi Qianqian felt a little nervous. She turned around and gave Shenjilia a reproachful look. "Didn't we agree to come secretly? Didn't he say that he would let her prepare herself and that his family would give her a heads up before she went over to their house to give her New Year greetings? This was different from what they had agreed on." Shenjilia felt a little innocent and said, "I didn't know either." "I'm innocent too." Yi Qianqian had the urge to slap him to death. She felt increasingly nervous. Chapter 1885. She had already been caught by her parents. How could she sneak into a hotel? Yi Qianqian reluctantly allowed herself to be dragged into the car. Then, she reluctantly followed them to the Shen residence. However, no matter how reluctant Yi Qianqian was, she had to put on a cheerful expression. The weather in the capital was very cold. The surrounding flowers, trees, and other greenery were all bare. Ice that had yet to melt hung from the branches. Even with festive lanterns hung, it still felt very monotonous. It was cold. Unlike the damp and cold in the south, the capital was so cold that it made one's mouth dry. Fortunately, there was a heater in the car, so Yi Qianqian was able to sit comfortably. As soon as she arrived at the Shen residence, she saw old Mrs. Shen sitting inside as expected. Old Mrs. Shen was twirling a prayer bead in her hand. The bead was engraved with complicated Sanskrit characters. She was dressed in 2 black qipao dresses with dark red embroidery. Her short white hair fell past her ears. When she saw Yi Qianqian, she couldn't help but take a second look. "You're back." Old Mrs. Shen sat on the sofa without moving. She glanced at Shenjilia and said, "You only know how to scare people away. You just went to Kingstown yesterday, and you're back today. I thought you were going to spend the new year in Kingstown." Shenjilia dragged his luggage and said with a smile, "How could I? I still want to spend the new year with Grandma. I'm afraid it's not just me." Old Mrs. Shen glanced at Yi Qianqian meaningfully. Yi Qianqian felt a little awkward and greeted, "Hello, Grandma. Happy New Year." "Happy New Year to you too. Nanny He, go and prepare a guest room for her." Nanny He was a little embarrassed. She looked at Shenjilia, meaning to ask for his opinion. Shenjilia replied, "What's the point? Just sleep with me." "No, no, no." Yi Qianqian felt even more awkward. "Let's just sleep in the guest room. Otherwise, I can go and stay in a hotel." "What hotel?" Old Mrs. Shen's attitude was a little arrogant. She glanced at Yi Qianqian and said, "Those who don't know might think that I'm mistreating my grandson's girlfriend." Humph, Yi Qianqian was speechless. She laughed dryly, feeling extremely awkward. When Shenjilia saw that, he was a little displeased and said, "Grandma, why do you have such unpleasant words on the new year? Do you want your grandma to speak nicely?" Old Mrs. Shen looked at Shenjilia with a look of disdain. "It's not like you don't know your grandmother. Are you dreaming?" Shenjilia found her completely unreasonable. Nanny He quietly carried Yi Qianqian's luggage to the guest room and said, "In that case, Miss Yi, let me help you pack." Yi Qianqian quickly waved her hands and said, "I think it's better if I do it myself. You go ahead with your work. I can handle such a small matter on my own." Old Mrs. Shen glanced at Yi Qianqian. Her attitude softened a little. He twirled the prayer beads in his hand and didn't say a word. When Shenjilia saw that, he walked up and said, "I'll pack up with you. Let's go." He followed Yi Qianqian to the guest room, and Shenjilia closed the door behind him. As soon as Yi Qianqian entered, she tried to listen to the sounds outside. Yi Qianqian didn't know if it was because no one was talking outside, or if it was because the soundproofing inside was really good, but she couldn't hear a single word. Chapter 1886. Shenjilia felt wronged. He grabbed Yi Qianqian's hand and said, "I didn't say that. They probably found out about my flight number and came to pick us up. They just didn't want you to stay in a hotel. What else could I do?" Yi Qianqian was a little angry. But it was their freedom to do what they wanted. What was the point of being angry? Shenjilia looked at Yi Qianqian and said, "Don't be angry. Instead of using this time, you should think about how to deal with grandmother." "How else can I deal with her? I don't even have a temper." Shenjilia laughed and said, "But I'm a little embarrassed too." "Why are you embarrassed? You're not the little wife. Do you remember the last time?" "What last time?" Yi Qianqian glared at him. "The last time you came to our house, grandmother threw a tantrum and said that you couldn't get pregnant. Didn't I make up a lie in a moment of desperation?" Yi Qianqian suddenly remembered, and her face immediately turned red. She looked at Shenjilia with wide eyes and said, "Yes, you said I was pregnant the last time. Now, what about pregnancy?" Yi Qianqian looked at her flat belly and felt so embarrassed that she wanted to find a hole to hide in. "No wonder. I felt that grandmother had been looking at me, and so had Nanny He. It was weird. I didn't expect it. Sob, so embarrassing." Shenjilia saw her expression and couldn't help but laugh. He said, "Take your time. There's no rush. Actually, I confessed to grandmother a few days ago. Yi Qianqian looked up and widened her eyes. She said angrily, "You played me." As she spoke, she was about to hit him. Shenjilia held her hand. There was a smile in his eyes, and his gentleness was unspoken. "It's just a child. Let's take it slow." Actually, grandmother already relented a few days ago. Relented? Yi Qianqian was a little confused. What did he mean? Didn't you notice that grandmother wasn't as harsh when you came this time? Yi Qianqian laughed when she heard that. I really didn't. Shenjilia nodded her head helplessly and said, "You'll slowly realize that grandmother has actually given up." Hey, old Shen. Yi Qianqian hugged Shenjilia's waist and looked aggrieved. Do you think we're going through a trial? Why are there so many things blocking the way when I want to be together? It makes me wonder if God is jealous of my beauty. Shenjilia burst into laughter. Don't worry. God isn't just jealous of your beauty. Yi Qianqian was delighted to hear that. Does that mean that you admit that I'm pretty? No, no, no. I suspect that God appreciates your shamelessness. That's why he's giving you some practice. Yi Qianqian's face darkened. She pushed him away and said, F*CKU. Shenjilia laughed out loud. He couldn't help but reach out to hold her chin and press her face down. When his lips touched hers, he felt a sense of satisfaction and excitement that was hard to contain. Shenjilia slowly pressed her against the door and gently pried open her pearly white teeth. He stirred them delicately and delved deeper. After more than 4 months apart, their feelings for each other had deepened, and their longing for each other had deepened. No matter how many difficulties there were in the middle, he managed to overcome them. There was no reason for him to give up at the last moment, was there? Yi Qianqian narrowed her eyes. She couldn't help but hug him and respond gently. Chapter 1887. Shenjilia's palm was a little cold, and Yi Qianqian shrank back. Shenjilia seemed to have sensed it too. He retracted his hand, held her waist, and lifted her up. Yi Qianqian gasped. Before she could react, Shenjilia had placed her on the bed. Because no one was staying in the room, the bedsheets, quilts, and pillows had been put away. There was only a mattress on the bed. Yi Qianqian felt a little strange, but Shenjilia didn't feel it. He pressed his body against hers, ran his fingers through her hair, and kissed her lightly. Yi Qianqian squirmed and turned her head away. Panting slightly, she said, "Make the bed." Yeah. Shenjilia was a little reluctant. Yi Qianqian gently pinched his waist, and Shenjilia reluctantly stood up. There were clean bedding in the cabinet. After Shenjilia removed it, Yi Qianqian took it from him and opened the dustproof bag. Shenjilia removed the dustproof cloth from the other furniture in the room. After that, both of them were quite busy. After much effort, they finally finished making the bed sheets, putting in the quilt and pillows. Yi Qianqian was covered in sweat. There was heating in the north. Yi Qianqian hadn't even taken off her down jacket since she entered the room. After busying himself, his face was flushed red from the heat. She unzipped her jacket, but it was still hot. She took off her sweater, leaving only a white, tight-fitting, long-sleeved t-shirt on her upper body. Suddenly, she caught a glimpse of a pair of ferocious eyes in the mirror not far away. Yi Qianqian made up her mind. As soon as she turned around, she was pounced on. Yi Qianqian reached out her hand, but before she could struggle, she was pressed down on the bed. Shenjilia bit down on her mouth like a wolf. His big hands moved up and down. Just as he lifted the hem of Yi Qianqian's shirt, she heard a knock on the door. Yi Qianqian's eyes flew open. She made up her mind and pushed Shenjilia hard. Shenjilia looked at the ceiling helplessly and sighed. He straightened his clothes before standing up to open the door. Old Mrs. Shen stood at the door and looked at Shenjilia. It's time for dinner. So early? Shenjilia began to suspect that the old lady was deliberately there to cause trouble. When old Mrs. Shen heard that, she snorted and said, "It's getting late. It's already 5:50 p.m. If it weren't for the fact that I don't think you can finish in 10 minutes, I wouldn't have come to call you." Shenjilia was stunned when he heard that. His face darkened as he asked, "Grandma, what the hell are you up to this time?" Yi Qianqian, who was hiding in a corner, blushed when she heard that. "What can I do?" The old lady snorted. "I just saw that you guys stayed in there for so long. You must not have finished cleaning up the house. You can't finish it in 10 minutes. You can clean up after eating." Shenjilia was speechless. He had thought. Yi Qianqian's face turned even redder. She shut her eyes tightly and looked embarrassed. Damn it, she thought the old lady knew what they were doing. How embarrassing. Shenjilia pursed his lips and replied, "Got it. Let's clean up a little longer." "Humph, hurry up." After saying this, the old lady turned around. Yi Qianqian had already put on a sweater. When she looked in the mirror, she realized that her lips were a little swollen. She licked them a few times and rubbed them. She tried to look as natural as possible. It's time for dinner. Chapter 1888. I said it's time for dinner. Why are you still lying down? Get up. Yi Qianqian tugged at him. Grandma seems to be very powerful. I'm a little scared. What's there to be scared of? Shenjilia lay on the bed, feeling a little bored. Wouldn't it be better to spend some alone time in Kingstown? I can't do anything now. It's too cruel. Yi Qianqian didn't know what he was thinking. She looked around and said, "How did Grandma know? Did she put a surveillance camera or something in the room?" Shenjilia laughed and said, "How could that be possible? My grandmother isn't that perverted. But why did she knock on the door so suddenly? It's a coincidence, a coincidence." Shenjilia got up and looked at Yi Qianqian with a helpless expression. How can you have such a big imagination? You can magnify everything. I have to give it to you. Yi Qianqian pouted and said, "But this is too much of a coincidence. I think this kind of coincidence is too scary. Of all times to knock on the door, it had to be at such an indescribable time. Of all times to call for dinner, it had to be 10 minutes in advance." Yi Qianqian felt a little uncomfortable thinking about it and said, "Old Shen." "Yes? I don't think it's appropriate for me to stay in your house without an official title." Shenjilia stared at her with amusement in his eyes. At the same time, there was a hint of menace in them. Yi Qianqian felt a little uncomfortable under his stare and said, "I don't think it's appropriate." "Why don't I? Grandma is actually a very good person. Now that she's finally relenting, you shouldn't shrink back." Shenjilia sighed softly. "If you shrink back now, it'll only worsen the good signs." But what could she do? She always felt that the old lady was too mysterious. If she let him stay here alone, would he see a ghost in the middle of the night? Or perhaps a ghost would press down on him. That would be terrible. Yi Qianqian was a little hesitant. Shenjilia reached out and pulled her over. He said softly, "All right, don't think about it anymore. It's not a big deal. You're just too nervous." Yi Qianqian didn't believe him. "Is that so?" Shenjilia gave her a look of certainty and said seriously, "Of course it's true. Let's go for dinner." Can I wear this?" Yi Qianqian was wearing a mint green turtleneck sweater, which looked quite warm. "But if I don't wear a jacket, will I look weird?" Shenjilia didn't mind. "It's our home. It's nothing. Didn't Grandma like you a lot in the beginning? Don't be nervous. Mom and Dad have a good impression of you. All right, Yi Qianqian replied. She finally relaxed a little. Shenjilia stood up and said, later on, if you don't know how to speak properly, don't speak. Whatever the elders ask you, just say it. Do you understand? Okay, I'll try my best. Shenjilia was a little worried, but it was almost time. If he didn't go out now, grandmother would have a problem with him. When he went out, the whole family was present. Shenluo seemed to have just returned from a trip. He was still wearing his jacket, and it looked a little damp. When she saw Yi Qianqian, she didn't immediately recognize her as the girl who had been holding Shen Manting's cell phone. He smiled and nodded, saying, hello. Chapter 1889. However, Shenjilia couldn't help but take another look at Yi Qianqian's face. He was slightly surprised. She looks so much like Yi Yuyu. So that's what Shenjilia likes. Call me big brother. Shenjilia hugged Yi Qianqian from behind and smiled brightly. When Shenluo saw Shenjilia's expression, he laughed and said in a low voice, idiot. Hey, what do you mean by idiot? Shenjilia hugged Yi Qianqian and gave him a kick. My wife is here. Watch your words. Shenluo reached out to unbutton his coat, took off his coat, and hung it up. When he heard what Shenluo said, he gave him a sidelong glance and snorted. He tugged Yi Qianqian into the kitchen to wash her hands and said, let's go. Ignore him. Yi Qianqian didn't want to bother with him at first, especially after she found out about what had happened between him and Shen Manting. She didn't like him at all. Fortunately, she had only seen him a few times. Yi Qianqian had seen Yi Yuyu from afar when they were still husband and wife. Later, after Yi Yuyu had divorced him, Yi Qianqian had met him once or twice. But they didn't interact much. However, Shenluo and Yi Qianqian didn't like the fact that Shen Manting had run away from home. When she saw that Shenluo was ignoring her, she felt relieved. They washed their hands and went to the table. The Shen family sat together. It's the new year. It's a blessing for our family to be able to gather together and have a meal together. Shen Longyue smiled and looked at his family with a satisfied look. Shen Longyue looked at Yi Qianqian and said, Qianqian, I don't know what you like to eat, but your aunt prepared a few home-cooked southern dishes for you. She even went to a southern restaurant to learn how to make soup. It took her a few days to learn. Try it. Yi Qianqian was flattered. When she heard that, she instinctively looked at Mrs. Shen. Mrs. Shen looked a little embarrassed and said, no, I'm just interested. Don't listen to your uncle. But try it, it should taste good. Yi Qianqian was moved. She had thought that the Shen family would not welcome her. She did not expect that Mrs. Shen would do this. Was it really as Shenjilia had said? Was she just too nervous? Mrs. Shen took a bowl of soup and filled it for Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian quickly took it from her and said, thank you, Auntie. Qianqian, how do you celebrate the New Year in the South? Is it different from ours? Shen Longyue asked. Yi Qianqian didn't know how the New Year was celebrated in the capital, but she knew how the New Year was celebrated in her hometown. When she heard that, Yi Qianqian felt a lot more relaxed. She slowly began to talk about the customs of her hometown. She didn't know if Shen Longyue and Mrs. Shen were really interested, or if they were pretending to be focused, but they seemed to be quite serious. Shen Luo looked at Yi Qianqian and seemed to be thinking about something. Suddenly, he nudged Shenjilia and asked, what's your girlfriend's name? Shenjilia was a little confused. He looked at Shenluo and asked, didn't you know her before? Besides, he often talked about Yi Qianqian at home. No matter what, it was impossible that he didn't know her name, right? I didn't pay attention. I forgot. That's right, this person doesn't care about anything other than what he's interested in. Chapter 1890. Shen Luo froze and instinctively glanced at Yi Qianqian. So it was her. No wonder she looked so much like Yi Yuyu. Shen Luo and Shen Zhilie were sitting next to each other, and their voices weren't loud. Yi Qianqian was suddenly stared at, and she instinctively looked back. However, Shen Luo quickly looked away and continued eating. Shen Zhilie felt that Shen Luo was a little strange. He suddenly recalled the incident with Yi Qianqian and Shen Manting. Feeling a little strange, he turned to look at Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian looked at Shen Zhilie and frowned in confusion. "It's fine. Let's eat." Shen Zhilie pushed her head back. "Let's eat, or it'll get cold," old Mrs. Shen reminded her. Shen Longyue also waved his hand and laughed. "Look at me, I'm just being considerate. Let's eat." Only then did Yi Qianqian lower her head and eat in silence. After dinner, Yi Qianqian didn't dare to eat too much. Furthermore, she was in someone else's house, so she didn't eat much. After that, he helped to clean up the mess. In the end, he was chased out. Shen Zhilie was chatting with Shen Luo on the sofa. She didn't know what they were talking about, but when they saw Yi Qianqian come out, they both looked over. "Qianqian, come here." Shen Zhilie waved his hand. When Yi Qianqian saw Shen Luo she felt a little uncomfortable. She felt a little strange all over. She had always felt that Shen Luo was a pervert. Not only had he tainted Yi Yuyu, but he had also defiled his own sister and nearly married a lunatic. Yi Qianqian didn't believe that such a person was mentally sound. She sat down beside Shen Zhilie. When she looked up, she saw Shen Luo. Shen Luo seemed to be sizing her up and said, "We finally meet." Yi Qianqian was stunned and didn't know how to react. "I'm sorry about last time." Shen Luo placed a can of beer in front of him. He raised it to Yi Qianqian and said, "If I had known that you would become my sister-in-law, I wouldn't have scolded you." Yi Qianqian finally reacted. She smiled awkwardly but didn't know what to say. "In the future, just forget about it." Shen Luo motioned for her to drink and drank the rest of the beer in one gulp. Yi Qianqian looked at him and asked, "Well, have you found Shen Manting yet?" Shen Luo was drinking. When he heard this, he suddenly felt a lump in his throat. Without making a sound, he drank all the wine. Then, he put the can down and said, "Found it. Is she really pregnant?" Yi Qianqian suddenly felt that she was being too unkind when she asked the question. Asking this question at this time was no different from rubbing salt in the wound. So what if she was pregnant? So what if she wasn't? Shen Manting wasn't here, which meant that she wasn't willing to come back with Shen Luo. Or perhaps, Shen Luo had no intention of bringing her back. In any case, it was inappropriate for Yi Qianqian to ask about it. Shen Luo laughed and said, "Yes, I'm pregnant. My belly is quite big, and I'm due to give birth in spring. The child is mine." Although Shen Manting had always denied it. But Shen Luo knew that the child must be his. Yi Qianqian felt even more embarrassed. She looked at Shen Zhilie for help. Shen Zhilie immediately understood. He cleared his throat and said, "Brother, I just remembered that I have something to do. I'll go out with Qianqian for a bit." Chapter 1891. Shen Luo appeared to be smiling. However, when Yi Qianqian looked at him, she inexplicably felt that he was rather pitiful. In fact, he did have feelings for Shen Manting. Yi Qianqian smiled at him and said, "Well, thank you, big brother." Shen Luo was older than her. Even if she wasn't with Shen Zhilie, it wouldn't be too much for her to call him big brother. When he heard Yi Qianqian's shout, he chuckled and nodded his head. "Go ahead." Shenjilie returned to his room to retrieve their jackets before he led Yi Qianqian out. The two walked out of the street and were surrounded by familiar neighbors. Regardless of whether they were young or old, when they saw Shenjilie, they would nod and greet him. Yi Qianqian could tell that Shenjilie was quite popular. Old Shen. Shenjilie looked at her with a puzzled expression and raised his eyebrows slightly. Yi Qianqian thought for a moment and asked, "Have you seen Shen Manting until now?" No. Shenjilie was very honest. He shrugged his shoulders and said, "I don't know how my brother found her, but she refused to come back with my brother. She stayed in the village with a big belly." "In a small village?" "Yeah. In Jiangnan. I heard that he's working as a private tutor or personal assistant. I'm not too sure, but it doesn't seem too difficult. He's just alone, and he doesn't seem to have anyone to take care of him." Yi Qianqian nodded. "She was pregnant at Lily's wedding, wasn't she?" "Probably. It's been so long." Shenjilie stopped in front of a river and looked at its surface. It was hard to tell what he was feeling. He slowly said, "I just don't understand. She already knew she was pregnant. Why did she run away? Since you don't like my brother, why don't you abort the child?" Yi Qianqian looked at the puzzled expression on Shenjilie's face. She seemed to have an inkling of what was going on, but she wasn't sure. Leaning against the railing by the river, Yi Qianqian looked out at the river. "A painter once told me about this." Shenjilie looked at her. Under the hazy night sky, the yellow streetlights shone on Yi Qianqian's face like a painting. Yi Qianqian turned around and looked at Shenjilie. She slowly said, "She said that pregnant women are brainless. They are rational, but they have been brainwashed by the idea of becoming mothers for the first time. They have an inexplicable love and expectation for the little thing in their wombs, who they don't know if it will ever be born." Yi Qianqian looked at Shenjilie. Shenjilie raised his eyebrows slightly and nodded. Most of the patients he received were women. Shenjilie could more or less empathize with her feelings. But he knew Shen Manting very well. He had always thought that Shen Manting was rational and decisive. Could it be that Shen Manting had once kept the child because of her sentiments as a saint? Shen Luoan seemed to understand, but at the same time, he didn't. Yi Qianqian looked at the surface of the river and sighed. "It's so cold." Shenjilie hugged her from behind and whispered, "Let's not go home tonight. Shall we sleep outside?" Yi Qianqian turned back to look at him in surprise. When she saw his amber eyes, she seemed to have seen through his intentions. "Won't Grandma have any objections?" "Well." Chapter 1892. Think about it based on her normal reaction. "Yes. I think so, too." Yi Qianqian turned her head and looked at him. "Forget it. It's only the first night. The day after tomorrow is New Year's Eve. I don't think it's a good idea." Shenjilie looked a little resentful. He leaned against her and blew hot air on her cheek. He gently nuzzled her and said, "You have to stay at home on New Year's Eve, the first, and the second day of the Lunar New Year. You can't spend the night outside." Forget it. Why do you have to spend the night outside?" Yi Qianqian asked even though she already knew the answer. Her cheeks were a little red from the cold or from embarrassment. Shenjilie snorted and leaned over to give her a kiss on the cheek. Yi Qianqian was startled. She twisted her body and looked around. Indeed, there were people watching them. "Are you crazy? There are so many people watching." Shenjilie chuckled and pulled her along. "Let's go." "Where to?" "Let's go somewhere fun." Shenjilie turned his head and smiled brightly. Yi Qianqian vaguely felt that it wasn't that simple. The place they were going to wasn't far, but it wasn't close either. Shenjilie went back to the car and drove for about 10 minutes before he stopped. After parking the car, Shenjilie led Yi Qianqian inside. It was Yi Qianqian's first time spending the winter in the north. She found that no matter where she went in the capital, there was a thick layer of cotton curtains at the entrance. Inside, there was a layer of rubber curtains that kept the heat inside well. At the same time, it also served as a soundproof effect. Shenjilie led Yi Qianqian inside and found that it seemed to be a late-night snack shop. There weren't many people inside, but it looked very lively. When they saw Shenjilie walk in, a group of people looked over. "Oh, old Shen is here. Come, come, come. I was just worried that my luck wasn't that good. Come sit down and take my place." "How can I take your place? I don't want to play anymore." "Old Shen, come, sit here." "Oh, you brought a pretty girl with you. Is she your girlfriend?" There were many people, but it didn't seem chaotic. Everyone looked very clean, but the atmosphere was noisy like a card game. Shenjilie led Yi Qianqian inside. Faced with the stares of the people inside, he put his hand on her neck and said, "Why are you playing cards? Call your sister-in-law." "Ah, it's really a girlfriend. She's so pretty." "Wow, old Shen, where did you get her?" "Tui, how can you talk about your brother like that? You should be asking him where he picked him up from. He's so lucky." Shenjilie couldn't help but laugh at their words. He scolded them with a smile, "Get lost. She has a good eye for talent. She fell in love with me at first sight. It can't be helped. I'm good looking, unlike you poor losers who only know how to play cards all day." As he spoke, Shenjilie brought over 2 chairs for himself and Yi Qianqian to sit down. Yi Qianqian had never met Shenjilie's friends. He had met his colleagues a few times, but they were just colleagues in Kingstown. It was a completely different concept from friends. There were about 6 or 7 of them. They all looked to be in their 20s or 30s. Their beer bottles were all over the place, and some of them had very red cheeks. But looking at them, they all had serious looks on their faces. Indeed, birds of a feather flocked together. Even his brother seemed like a good person. "Hey, you're so arrogant now that you have a girlfriend. Don't think that I won't dare to beat you up just because your girlfriend is here. Ha ha ha, stop fooling around. Old Shen, aren't you going to introduce us? I'm Shenjilie." Shenjilie patted his chest. "Get lost." Chapter 1893. Yi Qianqian smiled and watched them bicker with each other. "Hey, who's here?" A familiar voice came. Yi Qianqian and Shenjilie turned their heads at the same time and saw a man walking over. He was dressed in black casual clothes and looked quite fashionable. His black hair was short, and he looked clean. Yi Qianqian recognized him. "Isn't this Luo Zhan?" "No, that's not right. He has a northern accent. He should be Luo Zhan's twin brother, Luo Ran." Luo Ran came up and looked at Shenjilie with a smile. "Dr. Shen, why didn't you tell us that you were coming?" Shenjilie stood up and punched him. Luo Ran reached out his hand, and their fists collided. Then, they clasped hands and put their arms around each other's shoulders. Shenjilie bumped into him and teased, "Aren't you going to the bar to pick up girls today?" "Bah, no way," someone shouted and laughed. Someone shouted and laughed out loud. "I was almost pestered by a woman. Where did I get the courage to go to the bar now?" Ha 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 ha. Not only him, but the people next to him also laughed when they heard it. "Xie, shut up." Luo Ran grabbed an empty beer can and threw it at him. Xie dodged and laughed even more arrogantly. "You're angry out of shame." Shenjilie was interested and asked curiously, "What's going on? There seems to be some hot news." It's more than hot news. Shut up. Luo Ran interrupted him. Another person chimed in, what a disgrace to the little prince of love. Ha 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 ha. There was a roar of laughter. Luo Ran was annoyed and shouted, are you done? Shunjilia was shocked and looked sideways. Luo Ran's temper was not bad, even better than Shunjilia's. It was rare for him to speak so loudly like today. So what's going on? Shunjilia was even more curious. Xia Yin shrugged and said, the little prince of love won't tell me. The little prince of love is angry. Little prince of love, do you want a drink? Get lost. Luo Ran couldn't bear it anymore. If you say another word, I'll *CKU. Pfft, no one knew who laughed first, but the scene that had just quietened down with great difficulty burst into laughter again. When Yi Qianqian saw the defeated look on Luo Ran's face, she could almost imagine how proud Luo Ran was when he was surrounded by them. That was why they were hitting him when he was down. Shunjilia opened a bottle of wine and took a sip. He chuckled and teased, what goes around comes around. Shut up. Luo Ran turned his head and gently punched him on the shoulder. Aren't you going to introduce us? I was going to introduce her, but you interrupted me. Shunjilia put on an innocent face and put down the beer can. My woman, Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian smiled and said, hello, everyone. My name is Yi Qianqian. Hey, she's quite pretty. Why is she a good match for Shunjilia? Bah, it's better than being with you. At least old Shun is still a virgin. Yi Qianqian couldn't help but burst out laughing. She gave Shunjilia a strange look. Shunjilia picked up a few melon seeds and threw them at her. With a dark face, he said, shut up. Oh, I've put in a lot of effort to prove your innocence in front of your girlfriend, but you threw them at my face. Is there any justice in this world? Chapter 1894. Shunjilia's face turned red, and he said confidently, to prove my chastity, I would rather die than submit. Are any of you cleaner than me? Well, I'm not as clean as you, but you're a virgin. As soon as Xia Yin's voice fell, the group of people burst into laughter again. Seeing the group of people laughing so happily, and seeing Shunjilia's slightly red face, Yi Qianqian coughed lightly and said, not anymore. The laughter stopped abruptly. Yi Qianqian's face was a little red, and she felt a little embarrassed under the eyes of the people around her. Shunjilia let them laugh because he respected her. Yi Qianqian knew that, but she couldn't stand it anymore when they laughed at him like that. Although she was a little embarrassed, at least when she saw their expressions, Yi Qianqian felt a sense of relief. Humph. Shunjilia didn't expect Yi Qianqian to say that. He was surprised, but at the same time, he felt happy. Ha ha. Shunjilia saw the expressions of the group of people, and he had never felt so happy before. He couldn't help but hug Yi Qianqian and kiss her on the cheek. He said, I wanted to let these guys be proud, but I didn't expect you to be so honest. How boring. Yi Qianqian really wanted to roll her eyes at him. Look at how proud you are. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't be so happy. However, she still had to give a man face. When she heard that, Yi Qianqian lowered her head shyly and said, well, I'll bear with it next time and not expose it. Shunjilia looked even more proud. He loved Yi Qianqian's cooperation. When the people around heard that, they all looked angry. That's too much. You can't show off your love like this. If you have the guts, play cards with us. Old Shun, I didn't expect you to be so cunning. You deliberately brought your girlfriend to show off. I've seen through you. When Luo Ran saw Shunjilia's proud and arrogant face, he couldn't help but laugh. He took a sip of wine and introduced himself, hello, sister-in-law. I'm Luo Ran. As he spoke, Luo Ran pointed to a few people next to him and said, "The one with the nasty mouth is Xia Yin, the one with the reddest face is Lin Bin, the thinnest is Wang Shanin, and..." After introducing them one by one, Yi Qianqian realized that they were all college classmates. Most of them were doctors, but there were also a few from other professions. It could be seen that their relationship was very good. However, after spending some time with Shenjilia, he realized that Luo Ran was the closest to him. No matter what Shenjilia said, Luo Ran could keep up with him. Shenjilia could see through Luo Ran's thoughts. There seemed to be an unsurpassable tacit understanding between the two of them. Just a glance was enough to communicate. In the past, it was the same between her and Fang Tong Tong. Since when did everything change? After 3 rounds of drinking, Luo Ran, who had already drunk a little, was forced to drink more by Shenjilia. He was beginning to get drunk. From then on, Shenjilia began to ask Xia Yin about the story of Luo Ran, the famous prince of love who had lost his footing. Yi Qianqian leaned over curiously, but Xia Yin deliberately kept her in suspense and asked, "You want to know? Play a few rounds with us?" Shenjilia replied. "Don't talk too much. Be civilized." "Bah. Do you want to fight? Fight." Chapter 1895. Huh. Shenjilia knew there must be more to it than meets the eye. Yi Qianqian's interest was piqued when she heard that. Xia Yin smiled and said, "That's not the point. The point is that the lady boss seems to have been paying attention to our little prince of love for a long time. The reason why she hit it off with Luo Ran last time is probably because she's blind." "She's really blind to fall for Luo Ran," Shenjilia said. Yi Qianqian blinked and said, "I think Luo Ran is quite handsome." "Handsome?" Shenjilia glanced at Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian stuck out her tongue and didn't say anything. Xia Yin chuckled and said, "His looks are impeccable, but the number of women Luo Ran has slept with must be more than the number of men you've met. He goes to all kinds of nightclubs every day to date women. Can you imagine what kind of woman would fall for him?" Yi Qianqian had heard a little about it, but she didn't expect Luo Ran's private life to be so messy. "Ha ha ha. That woman has a lot of influence. She's very strict about catching him. Basically, every time Luo Ran goes to a bar, that woman will definitely appear. Then, as soon as Luo Ran starts to pick up girls, he'll definitely ruin it. That's really tragic." Shenjilia began to sympathize with him. The little prince of love is going to ruin his reputation. Xia Yin shrugged, opened a bottle of wine, and handed it to Shenjilia. "Come play cards." "Well, I think we should call it a day." Shenjilia got up and stretched. "I have to go back early." Xia Yin seemed to have expected it. He sneered and said, "I knew you were this kind of person. So, there's more to come." Hearing that, Shenjilia immediately sat down. He moved a stool over and asked, "How much do you want to bet?" Yi Qianqian was speechless. Almost everyone was drunk, and the game changed from the original bullfight to Golden Flower and Fight the Landlord. In the end, Xia Yin lost and said, "I'm not playing anymore. Let's go home and sleep." "Wait, you haven't finished yet." Shenjilia grabbed him. "What else is there to tell us?" Shenjilia was also a little tipsy, but he couldn't forget that incident. Xia Yin yawned and said, "Actually, it's not that big of a deal. It's just that you know the principle of the little prince of love. We can't have sex more than 3 times. How many times did Luo Ran play with her?" "I don't know." Xia Yin took a sip of wine. "But we've seen it more than 3 times. Yi Qianqian secretly clicked her tongue. How could such a person be a doctor? His background seemed to be strong enough. Or, was his ability strong enough? Such a person needed to be strong in every aspect. After listening to the gossip, Shenjilia looked at Luo Ran, who was lying on a few chairs and sleeping. He said angrily, "You guys take him back later. I'm leaving with my woman." "Alright, get lost." Xie Yin yawned and waved at Yi Qianqian. "Goodbye, sister-in-law." "Goodbye." Yi Qianqian waved back. When Shenjilia came out of the room, he could barely stand in the cold wind. He felt dizzy and collapsed on top of Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian quickly held him up and said, "You're really going all out just to get some gossip. Let's take a taxi back." "But I'm lucky today." "Let's not go back. Let's go there." Chapter 1896. Yi Qianqian was silent. She gritted her teeth and pinched his waist. Shenjilia shrank back, and the weight of his body fell even more toward Yi Qianqian. "You've had so much to drink, yet you're still so frivolous." Yi Qianqian's cheeks were red. "Be careful of sudden death. Give me the car keys." "No, walk over." Shenjilia buried his face in the crook of her neck. His words reeked of alcohol. "I just don't want to ride in the car anymore. I feel like I'll puke to death if I do." Yi Qianqian turned her head away in disgust and said, "Get lost. You stink." "I don't want to take the car," Shenjilia said coquettishly. "Let's go." Yi Qianqian pursed her lips. In the end, she still half-supported him as they walked toward the hotel. After getting a standard room, Yi Qianqian politely declined the waiter's request for help. She helped Shenjilia into the room and finally found the room. She opened the door and threw him onto the bed. Shenjilia was thrown to the ground, and he almost vomited. He opened his eyes and looked at Yi Qianqian. His vision blurred. With a look of disgust on her face, Yi Qianqian stepped forward to help Shenjilia take off his coat. She then went to boil a pot of water for him. There was fruit juice in the fridge. He took out the sour plum juice and warmed it in the kettle. When Shenjilia was helped up to drink the sour plum juice, he was a little confused and asked, "Isn't this sour plum juice?" "Yeah." "Sour plum soup to cure the hangover?" "I don't know, but I know that sour plum soup can stop vomiting." Yi Qianqian helped him up and poured the plum soup into his mouth. Shenjilia couldn't drink anymore and turned his head away. "My stomach is full of water. Can't you feel sorry for me?" Yi Qianqian gritted her teeth and smacked him in the stomach. Shenjilia wailed and looked at Yi Qianqian pitifully. "Serves you right." "I need to go to the bathroom," Shenjilia whispered. No matter how Yi Qianqian heard it, this guy sounded like he was acting coquettishly. "Go by yourself. What if you fall?" "So what if you fell? Why did you drink so much?" Although she said that, Yi Qianqian still supported him and walked step by step to the bathroom. After urinating, Yi Qianqian touched his neck and realized that there was a thin layer of sweat on it. She unhappily took off his sweater and scolded, "You don't know how to say it when it's hot. You might as well die from the heat." "Hot? You're only telling me now. I've already taken it off." Shenjilia opened his eyes in a daze. He looked at Yi Qianqian and said, "Of course not. You lied to me." Yi Qianqian was speechless. Ignoring him, Yi Qianqian took off her coat and sweater and went to take a shower. When he came out of the shower, Shenjilia was sprawled on the bed, wearing only a thin layer of clothing. His cheeks were flushed, and his breathing was even. He had fallen asleep. Yi Qianqian straightened his legs. When she finally managed to get him to lie down properly, Shenjilia turned around and slapped her to the ground. Yi Qianqian was startled and turned to look at him. She didn't know if Shenjilia was conscious or not, but he tugged on her leg. His entire body was like a buckle, and he locked her firmly in his arms. Yi Qianqian felt a little chilly and pushed him away. "The blanket is under you. Get up. Shengjilia nudged her. The smell of alcohol was strong. Yi Qianqian looked away in disgust and struggled with all her might. Not only did she fail to break free, but she was also pinned down by Shengjilia. Then, the smell of alcohol was forced into his mouth. Yi Qianqian frowned and looked away. Shen. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.